Oh.
And if I could ask everyone to mute your microphones. Thank you. Members of the public, if you're just joining us, we'll be getting started in a moment. The board secretary is just admitting everyone from the wait room. So we'll get started momentarily. All right, good morning. Today is Tuesday, March 9th, 2021. It is 9:30 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Good morning, Commissioner Decker.
Present.
Commissioner Bonner.
Here.
Commissioner Briggs. He's present. Commissioner Kalanche.
Here.
Commissioner Sobroff.
Here.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Also present, we have the Executive Director, the Chief of Police, the Inspector General, and the City Attorney. Madam President.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Welcome to everyone attending this morning. In terms of our business for today, we have a number of items on our agenda, including a number of reports and audits on a variety of matters. And we will begin our agenda shortly. All public comment will be heard during item 2 on the agenda, to which we will dedicate a total of 45 minutes. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. And at the request of the speaker can be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. Members of the public who participate in public comment are reminded that they can speak to any item on the agenda or a matter within the jurisdiction of the Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board. So you are free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinions will be deemed off topic and your public comment period will be concluded. Members of the public, if you choose to participate in public comment portion of the agenda, can participate in this meeting in one of the following ways. These are all outlined on the agenda. And may I ask all board members to please mute your microphones. Thank you. The public, as I said, can participate in this meeting in one of a number of ways outlined on the agenda. You can submit written public comment, as many of you have done in advance of the meeting, to the email address policecommission@lapd.online. If you've logged into this Zoom call, you can either raise your virtual hand, or if you called in via a telephone line, the number listed on the agenda, you can press *9 if you wish to speak on an agenda item. If you wish to just listen to the meeting, you can call into the numbers listed on the agenda that are designated for call in and listening purposes. As we begin our meeting today, it's important to acknowledge the passing of Officer Jose Anzona, who passed away as a result of injuries sustained on duty after being struck by a vehicle while he was directing traffic. We're all deeply saddened by his passing, and we offer our deepest condolences to the officer's family and friends and all in the LAPD and in the public with the public who worked alongside of him and feel his absence every day. Most importantly, we thank him for his service to our city. I know the chief will have more to say on that, and I'll leave it to the chief. And the chief's report is our first matter on the agenda. So Chief Moore, the floor is yours.
President Decker, thank you very much for the opportunity to provide my remarks today. And I will start with the passing of Officer Jose Anzona. I'm going to frame my remarks with that and then other significant events, including an unintentional discharge of a firearm. And then we'll get into the COVID update relative to the internal operations of the organization, crime statistics, and our personnel strength. Thank you again for honoring his Jose Anzona's passing, but more importantly, honoring his nearly decade of service to the people of Los Angeles. Jose leaves behind as a newlywed, a wife, Heather, his mother, Teresa, and 3 brothers, Nelson, Carlos, and Marcopola. He was a longtime Los Angeles resident and worked in the Newton area for the majority of his career. On the evening of the collision, he responded to a termination point of a pursuit where officers' attention was drawn to a fleeing motorist, and that motorist struck another motorist in an intersection in a violent collision. And Officer Nzora, as officers do every day, responded to back up and provide support and safety for those officers that were on scene dealing with a very hectic and chaotic scene. He immediately dispatched and was present on the street with his partner, attempting to control traffic to protect the officers who were still involved in this unfolding incident. And during the course of that, in a very short few minutes, a motorist coming through that area apparently did not see Officer Nzora and struck him. And that violent collision resulted in Officer Nzora experiencing a traumatic and grave head wound, an injury that in his transport to USCMC and on his arrival, he was in very dire circumstances. As I said on the day of his passing, and I'll expound here, the level of care and extraordinary efforts by the USCMC staff was without peer. They worked diligently as he fought and struggled for his life. And unfortunately, he lost that battle this last week. He represents the 9th officer that we've lost this year, in this past 12 months, and the 235th officer as an agency that have been killed in the line of duty. His passing only strengthens our resolve to represent the people of this agency with honor and integrity, to serve in a manner that he served, and to represent his legacy in a manner that we go out each day to protect the people of the city. It also speaks to the dangers that our officers are engaged in typical matters that we go about many times with little thought, providing traffic control, directing motorists away from a scene in order to protect them and protect others. And yet in those instances, out of the millions of cycles, these types of dangers exist in each one, and the calamity can be catastrophic as it is here. Services for Officer Nzora are pending, and I just would ask for everyone's continued support, your prayers and thoughts for the family, as well as the men and women of Newton area. This past Thursday, I was privileged to attend in a COVID compliant fundraising effort for his family at the station, but and even more important to that, and there was a tremendous outpouring of support from the community as well as other fellow officers from agencies, both Los Angeles and across this region, was the opportunity for the people of Newton in this agency to come together and console each other and support each other in this moment of grief. Now, moving on to other events and instances that happen, I want to, on a more celebratory note, I want to recognize yesterday as International Women's Day, and this entire month as an opportunity for us in Los Angeles in the police department to recognize the contributions, the achievement of women, and the differences and the benefits that women have brought to the American policing, and that Los Angeles has led in American policing in demonstrating our efforts to achieve gender equity and to improve policing by having the insights, the capabilities, the added strengths, and unique characteristics that women bring to this profession. Whether it's, as I said yesterday in my social media post, whether it was the first woman, Alice Stebbings Wells, who came to the organization in 1910, or our most recent recruit, each showcased to us the opportunity and encounters in the field and leadership positions such as Assistant Chief Gramala, Ms. Rhodes, Ms. Anne-Marie Sauer, Deputy Chief Regina Scott, and others, Deputy Chief Amada Tangarides, that to bring a strength of resilience and an ability to communicate and problem solve in a way that I believe makes this agency stronger. And I look forward to the next couple of weeks as we have an opportunity to, as we celebrate this diversity every day, but we have an opportunity to particularly showcase the achievements, but most and as important, the path forward. Because as Commissioner Decker, as you frequently remind us, the goal is to deepen that diversity beyond the 18 to 19% of our sworn members and to reach parity. And I'm proud of the work this last year in reaching over 50% of our recruit class as being women within the organization, but we know our work is cut out for us as we pursue this greater level of diversity and representation. A third item I want to comment on is last Wednesday we had a Zoom meeting given this COVID pandemic, in which former Police Commissioner Paula Madison hosted, as well as Commission President Decker, with the Coalition for a Better Los Angeles and Asian Pacific Islander Safety Summit. It was emceed, Mistress of Ceremony was Assistant Chief Beatrice Gramala, and I enjoyed the nearly 2-hour conversation, a dialogue back and forth. And really what came from it and what I would bring to this commission is a continuation of Chief Grimalo's remarks last Tuesday, which is our effort, our commitment to improve on our awareness, our training, the development and cultural sensitivity of our officers, particularly with the API community, as to instances of hate, instances of racism, bigotry, the types of just crude and insulting and absolutely types of conduct that have no place in Los Angeles. And so that was a great and ample opportunity for us to understand the diversity within the API community itself, languages and differences that just exist with what people may put into one group is actually many groups. And I look forward to an action plan in the coming weeks and months that deepen our ability as an agency, particularly in the instances of hate instances, not hate crimes. I believe the hate crime area that we're fairly uniform in our belief that our reporting standards, our investigative prowess, our sensitivity is aggressive in that. But I do believe that there are areas of improvement on instances where the community brings to our attention instances of hate, as well as our response when we learn of those to ensure that we're aggressively pursuing what may be not an unlawful act, but should definitely result in an investigation and inquiry by our organization so that we don't give a sense that that type of hate speak and instances are allowable within this area, within this city. I also look forward to working with organizations that track hate instances separately from the department so that we can compare our instances, because as we heard last week, there are many more instances reported to community-based organizations than there are to the department. And I want to get that fixed. I want to get that fixed in a manner that people feel free to reach out to us as equally as they do at the advocate community. Fourth area of information for you is to recognize that today starts the former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin's trial regarding the death of George Floyd. And as this agency, as well as other major departments across the country, are watching that trial unfold closely, and we are in the midst of doing contingency planning for this region to facilitate First Amendment rights that we do expect and will protect others that within our community across Los Angeles that wish to express themselves, demonstrate their feelings, their disgust, their disagreement, their intolerance of the actions that involved the death of George Floyd, but also in regards to the trial and deliberations and the outcome that we all know will be in the weeks and ahead of us. As such, the department is in the midst of contingency planning for the matters of the issues of the trial, the deliberation, and the eventual outcome and announcement. We're working to ensure that we protect the rights of everyone who wish to express their feelings, while also ensuring that attacks on others are not tolerated, nor riotous acts involving arson or violence or damage to property. Last issue I want to bring up is a non-tactical unintentional discharge that occurred. And that occurred this past 6th of March at approximately 4:30 in the morning in the harbor area of Los Angeles. There, an off-duty officer was hosting a party at his house, and in the early morning hours of the 6th, the officer and one of his guests apparently became involved in a physical altercation. And during that altercation, the officer reached for a drawer, and inside that drawer, he kept his unholstered duty pistol. And when he reached for that weapon discharged. Now, this is information based on the officer's account and our very preliminary information. The gun, when it discharged, that round penetrated the drawer and lodged into an interior wall. Unfortunately, no one was injured as a result of that discharge. The guest that was involved in that altercation left the location and later notified the department of the incident. Force investigation and internal affairs detectives responded to the scene, are investigating this incident. My preliminary review of this incident I have significant concerns about the conduct of this officer and the circumstances of how this occurred. The involved officer has been assigned home, and his peace officer powers have been suspended pending the outcome of this investigation. Moving over to the COVID update regarding the internal operations, I'm happy to report that now that we're in phase 1B of the COVID vaccination process, that we are now doing COVID vaccination of all of our personnel who are willing to take the vaccine. More than 4,571 of our personnel have now taken at least one of the 2 doses, and 2,473 have completed the regimen of the 2-dose vaccine. We continue to vaccinate employees Tuesday through Friday each week. Our goal is to achieve where every member of the organization who is willing to take the vaccine has that opportunity by the end of March and has completed the vaccine regimen by the end of April, the first week of May. We are continuing our education campaign and awareness about the power and importance of this vaccine and protecting the officer themselves, as well as protecting their family members and of course also the members of the public and co-workers. I'm happy to report that the rate of infection for officers has slowed. Last week to this week, we've had an additional 11 officers who are now tested positive. 5 of those are sworn members of the organization. 6 are civilian. That totals 2,667. I've also seen a reduction in the number of officers that are at home due to COVID convalescing and isolation. That number is now 158. That's a reduction of 19 personnel that have been able to return to duty are now back in operations. We now have a total return to duty of 2,521 of our personnel who have been previously impacted by the COVID virus. Last issue on my COVID update is I want to take a moment and just call out the work of Facilities Management Division. It is a very small single digits number of personnel that manage all the department's facilities across this entire city, which is well in excess of 75 different sites. And we charged them with improving our protective measures at our various public sites and work sites. And I'm happy to report that they've now completed the reconstitution plan for all of our front desks, our public counters, and a number of work sites across the city. This has included not just shields and barriers to protect people as they speak back and forth with each other and protect them from transmission of the virus, but also a number of signs and postings, more than 1,700 vinyl signs, for instance, at 50 different sites. This small group both measured, fabricated, and installed this equipment, this protective wear, and I'm thankful for their contribution and for their Herculean effort in a very short period of time. This will help and assist us as we move, hopefully, from the purple realm of the vaccine, of the COVID pandemic in Los Angeles County, and as we move into the red and lesser levels when we begin to reopen our front desks and other operations for public engagement. This will help improve the safety of all personnel involved. Moving to our crime statistics, this past week, we did see a reduction in our shooting violence compared to the week previously. And we also saw, thankfully, none of our robbery, in our instances of robbery, that there was no shootings that were involved. Last week, that was a very concerning topic, both in the Chief Kamala's remarks to you, as well as us as an agency, where we saw 18 robbery victims that had been shot, 2 involving homicides, versus 1 the previous year. This last week, in our robberies, they are down versus the same period last year, and there's one outlier in that work, and that is in our Hollywood area. Now, in the Hollywood area, we have seen an increase in street robberies, as well as in our aggravated assaults. Yesterday, I was briefed by Chief Kamala and by our ComStat personnel, where we've seen street robberies increase primarily on the east side of Hollywood Boulevard towards the western area. These are primarily strong arm robberies, and these are occurring generally in the late afternoon, early evening hours. I'm thankful that Hollywood has shifted resources to have increased vigilance in those areas, as well as their public outreach and engagement for people to be aware of their surroundings when they're in public settings. I'm also pleased to announce that their arrests that they've seen this last week, that of the 23 street robberies, they had 8 arrests, which tells me that their investigations, their response, their canvassing, their pursuit of those people responsible for these instances is strong. Other matters in regards to our crime picture, what I would ask the public to continue to do as we continue to start restoring operations and businesses, we anticipate in the coming weeks an expansion of businesses opening and people returning back to more traditional workflows, is we do anticipate that burglary and theft from vehicles and theft opportunities, property crimes, that were at pre-pandemic levels prior to those closures are going to be, there's going to be a temptation for the criminal element to return to these earlier practices. And while enforcement will be present and with a smaller workforce will be challenged, what we really need and what I'm asking for is prevention measures. It's for community members to lock it, hide it, keep it, to recognize as they return back to more normal or traditional means of entertaining, going to businesses, restaurants, dining establishments, going back and forth to work locations, is that they secure their property, they keep it out of view, that they ensure that they pay attention to their surroundings, and that they lock and secure their residences, and that they keep foliage and other things reduced so that people do not have the ability to prowl on houses, as they're going to see with the return of school. We're hoping by the end of this month, 1st of April, begin to get more opportunities for opportunists. And what we need is, while the department will move and shift resources as instances occur, the preventive element is many more times more powerful in preventing a return to pre-COVID levels in property crime than an enforcement posture alone. Let me close by our officer-involved shooting information, and that is we have now had a total of 4 officer-involved shootings versus 4 officer-involved shootings last year, with 1 fatal this year versus 1 fatal last year. Those numbers, while par with last year, are well below our 4-year average. Our personnel strength as of the 27th of February is 9,680 sworn personnel and 2,840 civilian. I want to draw a line or a mark on this point. 9,680 sworn personnel is actually a lower level of sworn personnel than we had projected as our budget, our fiscal year budget, when we began July 1st of fiscal year 2021. It is about 100 officers fewer than what we had calendared ourselves to reduce our workforce from 10,100 sworn personnel to 9,750 or so. The organization has realigned. We have moved resources towards stations, towards ensuring patrols. Our gang enforcement details, our investigative resources on shooting violence are bolstered and reinforced, and we have reduced our specialized units, and we have reduced and eliminated some of those functions. Secondly, our civilian staffing has now reached the level that was projected with the budget cutbacks that were implemented this past July. The budget that was proposed and approved by this commission is still before the mayor and his teams for their deliberation and preparation for fiscal year 21-22. And I'm hopeful that today the actions of the House of Representatives and the federal government is going to find the ability to pass the stimulus package, which provides a substantial relief for local governments, including the state of Los Angeles, to make up for lost revenues in the hundreds of millions of dollars that have resulted in these necessary cutbacks to the organization. There are absolute needs for us to maintain our staffing and restore positions as we move forward, given the demands of public safety in Los Angeles, and then also, in closing, recognizing that officers in our communities establishing relationships, forming and having communications and building upon trust is a matter that involves time, and that the time involves staffing, and staffing involves staffing levels that we've seen some loss in resources, and I'm hopeful that as we exit this pandemic and with the presence of additional funding opportunities for the city, that we'll be able to protect moving forward. That concludes my remarks, and I thank you for your time on this.
Thank you, Chief. A few follow-up questions. Taking the last matter first, given that the department has reached levels of officer staffing below what was projected for the budget, does that mean the department can now reinstitute hiring to hire up for those 80 or so positions that are currently vacant, or is that not authorized yet?
Those have not been authorized yet. The financial status report for the city, the third financial report, is going before the board, the city council, I believe, the week of the 22nd. And in that is also going to be the council's action relative to the revised MOUs or agreements with labor that make concessions, labor concessions to save monies for the city to meet this moment with regards to the fiscal crisis. It's hoped that the passage of that modified or adjusted contract provisions, which have those deferred raises in the future, and both sworn and civilian, and is going to have monies savings with those in concert with the anticipated bill that's being passed for a stimulus package, that those combinations is going to allow the city to be in a position to move us away from a current hard freeze without hiring and out promotions and upgrades, and move us into a position of some relief for both those elements. I look forward to conversations with both the continued conversations with the mayor, who I know continues to support public safety as his first matter of priorities, as well as with this council, recognizing that the staffing of the organization is at a critical juncture in time.
All right, thank you, Chief. Members of the commission, just as an FYI, I'm working with Mr. Teefank and Commissioner Briggs to schedule sometime in the future a more detailed update on the budget and budget impacts. I'll hold the remainder of my questions for that opportunity. I should also just add, in terms of coming up in the future, we will be having presentations in honor of Women's History Month as well. And hopefully begin a report back, Chief. You talked about the meeting with the Coalition for a Better LA, and as I'm sure you've been briefed, we did ask for a number of follow-ups as a result of last week's meeting, and we look forward to that too. I'm sure commissioners, you, like I, have many questions on the unintentional discharge in Harbor Division, but since we will be hearing that matter as a categorical use of force, I'll reserve my questions for that opportunity, and will only say that I'm heartened by the COVID numbers that you reported on, Chief, and hopefully reflective of our meeting. Along those lines, and I realize this, it may be impossible for you to give a definitive date on the reopening of the divisions, as a lot depends upon vaccine availability and directions from county health. But I wonder if, given all the efforts that have been made by Facilities Management Division to add protective measures, signage, as you described, do you have a sense for the public of when they can expect the divisions to be open again to the public? Are we thinking?
I think on the shortest period is weeks, the longest period is months. And I know that I would expect, though, the hope and the belief is, as we see, as we receive, when we see the instances of telework, for instance, currently we still have hundreds of employees across the city, and we see non-essential workers that are still working from home. As those standards are relaxed and people can return safely back to the workplace, I believe that's when the instances of encounters with members of the public and front desk counters should improve. When we see in-place dining, when we see entertainment venues and other locations that can have gatherings, and that's how we will moderate. So again, I think that, and I just encourage the continued vaccine flows. Yesterday in the mayor's cabinet meeting, he spoke about the coming weeks seeing ample supply of vaccines for the public as well. And it's certainly President Biden's remarks that by the end of May, that everyone who is every adult in America will have the ability to have access to a vaccine. That vaccine, in concert with personal protective measures, absent a variant that is defeats that vaccine, I would anticipate then summer type matters where we're more in much more relaxed settings, in the sense of personal protective face coverings for the rest of this year, personal protective measures like shields and guards, and frequent cleaning as an ongoing basis as we move through 2021. But the ability to open those locations as a safe haven, if you will, for people to come and report crimes, report instances, and update on investigations. That's something I look forward to in the foreseeable future. I know that's a bit vague, but I don't have a goal of 30 days. What I've talked to our people about is, let's have the contingency, let's be ready. So as we know, because we do anticipate, I do expect this to unfold in the coming weeks and months.
Well, certainly appreciate how challenging it is to estimate as we're all, continue to await vaccines and vaccine distribution, and as the numbers of COVID infections continue to go down, there's cause to be hopeful. So,
Yes.
but thank you, Chief. Appreciate that. Mr. Soboroff, I saw you had a hand raised, sir, Commissioner.
Sure. Chief, on the staffing related to the $150 million that was reallocated from the budget to help with issues where people felt that the public and the department would be better served if other people were to provide services regarding mental health, homelessness, drug overdose, some of the EMT calls, etc. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, that one of the reasons that we are at these lower and even lower than we thought staffing areas is because of that reallocation or denial of that budget request. And my question is, should the public feel that $150 million and should the officers on the ground feel that $150 million has been spent and used to for the purposes of providing the services to the community and to relieving the officers of not allowing other people to do things that that officers may not have to do, because this is basically back to the baton pass, or are we in a position where we are just seeing all the negative ramifications of this relocation of $150 million, and we haven't seen any of the positive yet?
So,
long question, sorry.
well, it's a bit complex, but let me try to answer it in as straightforward a fashion as possible. The $152 million that was reallocated, about a third of it maintained essential workers, many of them communities of color, members of communities of color at the city workforce. Some $40 million was allocated to which would otherwise, in the absence of that reallocation, would have resulted in those individuals either being furloughed or lost their positions. So I think city services and services to our community were bolstered or maintained, at least were maintained by a significant portion of that reallocation. Another significant portion was just recently acted on by the council last week, and I think it's subject to the mayor's approval. But I was encouraged by I think it was approximately 32 million or 34 million of that monies that were redesigned from what a proposal was earlier back in December, which I voiced significant concerns about. Then the matter of December, the allocation involved park improvements, curb cutouts, street slurries, and other improvements that I agree that, particularly in communities of color, that I felt have been underserved and were in need of those improvements. But the priority versus more important outreach and engagement, community intervention workers, gang intervention workers, supportive youth programs, jobs programs that would truly serve our most underserved communities. That programming, in my view, could needed improvement. I'm happy. My cursory review of the reallocation that was identified by the council deepened significantly investment in intervention work and community peacekeepers and outreach and engagement with youth programs that I think will provide for improvement in public safety. The aspect that we continue to see in a pilot basis, and we need to amplify and really give more volume and voice to, is alternative services. Community intervention workers is an example of alternative services. Rather than a police officer attempting to keep the peace and maintain eliminate differences between individuals who may resort to violence, community intervention workers are very adept at that, and can work effectively in concert with a public safety plan. What we're looking now is mental health workers, outreach and engagement workers that can deal with people experiencing mental illness, mental crises, minor disputes that are not law enforcement matters, and do so off hours and on Saturdays and Sundays and at 3 a.m. And the piloting of those models, the psych vans that have been positioned, the 5 of those vans and the deployment of those is a good start. What we need moving forward is that for that to be amplified and built to scale of a city of 4 million, and to do so in a manner that relieves the organization of those calls, but also protects the public that services are still going to be there and are still going to provide that critical interaction. What's critical here is that we not drop that because it's no longer a police matter and it not be, and no one pick it up. That actually is going to undermine safety in our communities. So right now, as a backstop, the department continues to respond to those in the absence of alternative services. Yet we've also seen the curtailment or the reduction in workforce, that complicates and worsens our scenario, which takes away time that officers otherwise would have that would be discretionary time in building relationships and just saying hello and reaching out and having communications, foot beats, encounters. I had a conversation last Thursday with the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce and the Hollywood BID, very concerned about the reduction in foot beats and presence of officers in the Hollywood Entertainment District. Similar concerns that have been expressed in the Venice Beach area, as well as the LA Live area and the University Park area. These are all areas that have sustained a reduction in workforce as a result of the reduction in our staffing levels. Those reductions are because those deployments there are not, they're neither budget and they're more discretionary than the uniform patrols that must be in our streets in order to handle emergency calls for service and respond to routine and more urgent matters. And so all in all, I think development of alternative services, as I spoke with the Hollywood Chamber, their outreach, their engagement, using people with mental health counseling experience, outreach workers engagement, can help bolster the safety of the Hollywood community. It does not have to be law enforcement led. And the reliance upon law enforcement at this point, many of our elected officials and others are saying we need to reprioritize. I agree with that, as you and other commissioners have. The key here is the transition of having those supportive services in place and then handing that resource to them so we can move forward. Lastly, I do look forward to continue working with all of our partners. I had a conversation last week with Department of Mental Health, Dr. Sharon, about our co-responder model and deepening our commitment so that our SMART teams and a mental health clinician with a police officer handling those middle ground issues that may involve public safety, but also involve mental health issues, that we need to deepen and expand that, while we also look for the pure mental health worker and maybe an EMT type solution that we hear frequently about in other parts of the country. So it's a bit long-winded, I'm sorry, but it speaks to kind of the complexity of your question.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Kalanche, go ahead.
Good morning, Chief. Good morning, everyone. I just have a comment and then a question for you, Chief. To kind of follow up on the question that Commissioner Sobroff brought up about the 150 million. This is just a comment. I think that last week we heard from the intervention community and the peacemakers out in South LA how important it is to fund those services. I believe in the budget that was approved last week by council, the intervention community was asking for about 50 million of 150 million. I think they got 2 to 3 million. So there's still a huge need to invest in these communities. So just want to say that, because I think that if we're really going to invest in these communities, we need to be intentional about it. I believe a skate park was funded at $1 million in the Valley, which I don't know how that reduces crime or how that addresses violence. Just want to put that out there as a follow-up. So my question, I don't know if you mentioned this, Chief, in the COVID information you provided, but what percentage of the department is vaccinated? Do you know? I don't know if I missed it or if it wasn't brought up.
No, it's my apologies. I did not give you a percentage numbers. I just gave you whole numbers. We're at 4571 that has the first vaccination of a workforce of approximately 12,500. So if I'd ask you to work the math real quick, but rather than myself, I think that's about 28 to 29% top of head would be my estimation. Our goal is that everyone who's willing and able to take the vaccine. There are some prohibitions, for instance, those that have had recently the COVID virus are encouraged to wait typically at least 60 to 90 days. So we have some of our personnel that are not eligible for the vaccine, but for them, all those that are eligible, our desire is to get well above the 75% threshold. And I call it a threshold because there's a common view in the sense of a herd immunity or bulk of the organization. We, like many other emergency responders and the health society and health profession and others, know that we have about a 60 to 70% standing readiness for people to take this vaccine. And then we have another 20 to 30% that exercise some caution and concern. That is a group we're aiming for to educate and promote them to take this vaccine. It is our desire that everyone take this vaccine who can. We believe it's the best protection for them, as well as their family, as well as their coworkers, and also the public. So we are continuing our education campaign. Part of that is by, for instance, talking about these numbers and letting people know that, for instance, the second shot, you go to the internet to find the worst stories about health, right? And so what's the consequence of the second shot? And we've seen a very, very low rate, single-digit rate of having adverse impacts, and those impacts have not involved any hospitalization or any serious health consequence. They have involved a headache or minor flu-like symptoms or an arm pain. But again, those are less than 1 in 10 of those that have received, of the nearly 2,500 that received that second dose. And we know that 2 weeks after that second dose, that the effectiveness of the Moderna, which is the one that our personnel are receiving, is in excess of 90% in effectiveness of avoiding this pandemic.
Okay, that's super helpful, and I'm glad to see that the numbers are increasing of officers that are vaccinated, or at least have the first shot. Thank you so much, Chief. That was it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it. Any further commission questions? All right, Commissioner Bonner, go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you. Real quick, just picking up on some of the comments about the interventionists and community interventions and so on. One thing that's a little bit concerning is as things hopefully will stay on track and improve throughout the year, and the economy will open and people will be out and about. And we've had a lot of discussion about some of the areas where the reported crime has been down, and that's been attributed to the stay-at-home orders. And so the logical assumption is that as those orders are lifted, that you'll see some of those numbers continue to climb. And so the question is there, or can there be any broader planning effort that would be undertaken to where the department at least could provide information to those who are kind of on the front lines of prevention? I'm speaking to those that are in the public health community and the community intervention, the gang intervention, the whole swath of organizations that need to be prepared to do what they can do to help moderate that trend, with the goal of not being here a year from now and just reflecting on the number of people who came out of their home and went into the criminal justice system either as a victim or a perpetrator. So the question just is there, or could there be some broader planning effort where there could be collaborative conversation, information sharing, resource sharing potentially, in order to try to avoid that situation where we see those numbers go up and just more people coming through the system?
Yes, absolutely, Commissioner. My job, one of my jobs as chief, is, in addition to protecting our people, is telling their story. And telling their story is communicating this message here to you and to the public who are listening today about the fact that we are looking ahead and we are planning ahead, and we do anticipate. But we're not. It's not fatal complete. We're not saying that this is inevitable. What we're saying is act now and recognize that as we've enjoyed a reduction in property crime, that's primarily been, we believe, largely influenced by the lack of opportunity. People who don't have access to vehicles or or access to homes because they're occupied. And as those circumstances change, we anticipate that opportunists are going to want to prey upon that, and that the best means is not through solely, we'll have an enforcement awareness of this, and certainly our engagement with our community volunteers and their visibility in the areas and outreach and engagement, but hardening to target prevention is the message. I had a Zoom call last night with a group of students from Cal State LA, and we talked about crime prevention as a critical sense of policing in the 21st century. It's not, let's look at the emerging pandemic of say, resurgence of property crime and just allow it to happen, but we're going to try to counter it. One is to recognize, to be aware, to call it out, and also call out the shared responsibility that it's not going to be law enforcement that stops it. It's going to be law enforcement that says this is coming. We need to recognize that. And what do we do to prepare our house, ourselves as Angelenos? As advocates, we look for them to, as we talk with them and with the clergy forum tomorrow night, is to speak from the bully pulpit and whatever house of worship that is, and talk about people's responsibilities, to ask them as they get congregations back together again, how are you securing your vehicles? How are you going about your day? When we talk about East Hollywood and the robbery instances, we are going to pursue identifying those responsible and arresting them aggressively. But we're also asking the public to be mindful of their surroundings and recognize that there are people who are preying upon them, whether it be on transit or on the street, and that they have a role in prevention of this. This is not to shirk from our responsibility, but I think it is more reflective of the fact that Los Angeles is safer when Los Angeles joins together and says, what is coming? What's our next challenge? How are we dealing with the current one? And then what is our next one as we see the evolution of this pandemic? I think you and I, as we sat yesterday on the crime call, spoke about this. No one was here during the last pandemic, despite how long we've been here. 100 years ago, this was unique. It was unique then, and certainly I pray to be a novel issue this time. But as we move forward, we can use our background experience to anticipate not just what's happened this last year, but what we traditionally see happen with conventions and business hotelers and others, that we see opportunities who prey upon those. To call that out now, not to say it's inevitable, but to call it out and say, not to say I told you so, but to say let's work together to stop it. And those advocates that you spoke about are critical to them changing their voice as well and messaging to point the responsibilities of all involved.
Oh, I appreciate that. I think the other two areas that I would encourage you to focus on as well is you have number one, you have mental health, for example. There's been a lot of discussion, a lot of information available about the mental health impacts of the pandemic and what's expected there. And as we did discuss yesterday, even in the school system, there's some plans to, as kids come back to school, rather than just rush everybody back into reading, writing, and arithmetic, there's a plan to get kids healthy and focus on mental health and get them accustomed to being back in that social environment, and then lay the groundwork for learning. But so the main point is that there's an awareness that there's going to be a lot of mental health issues, and there's also an awareness that there's likely to be some major increases in the homelessness crisis as well, as people who've fallen behind in rent and mortgages and so on may fall further behind or end up without shelter. And so in those areas, again, as you talk about alternative delivery and all that's going on there, those strike me as areas that could benefit from some concerted collaboration. It's beyond the scope of the department. This is probably a city and county issue as well. But just coming into it, as you mentioned, we talked about nobody knew how to do this coming in because it kind of came upon us. But we suffered, whether it was testing and those things, logistical issues with vaccinations, all those efforts suffered from lack of planning and coordination, and just the difficulties of kind of building it, on the fly, because that's what was required in that urgent situation. Now we're dealing with issues that people have been identifying as very foreseeable in terms of what we anticipate coming down the pike. So I'm just encouraging us to not just respond or deal with it only with response, so that people are just out doing more arrest and addressing it after the fact, but to figure out how we can start a conversation broadly about getting a coalition of efforts together to try to address these areas in some more compassionate way, so that we're just not bringing more people into the system going forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowner. Any further questions from commissioners? Very well. Let's proceed then to public comment. Madam Secretary, please open the public comment period and proceed when you're ready. Thank you.
Okay, our first speaker is Jason R., followed by Zach Sherwin.
Hello,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
All right, this one goes out to little old Stevie Soberoff, the collector of typewriters. Just like those typewriters, you're dated and it's time for you to be replaced. Your wife, Patty, she wants you to spend some more time with her instead of being the broker for LAPD.
You're off topic, sir. If you want to address something specific, please proceed.
Soberoff, who needs to go immediately, and I'll tell you why. All right, because let's talk about the emails that recently came out. I don't know if the commissioners have looked into that, but you forwarded an email, Steve, little Stevie, from Fred Ali of the Weingart Foundation to the LAPD and asked that the grant that you solicited be kept confidential until hearing from directly from the foundation, a foundation that you sit on as a board of director. Any other commissioners find this to be a conflict of interest? Wait, I got another one. How about how Steve Soberoff instructed LA Times reporter Cindy Chang to add in a PR spin on Chief Moore's so-called distinguished career in the electronic edition of an article criticizing him for his remarks on George Floyd? You know, the same ones where he said the blood of George Floyd was just as much on the hands of protesters as it was on the police that murdered him, right? So little Stevie's been on this board of commissioners for 8 years and was president for 4 years. His purpose on this commission is to find funding for police among his vast network and to be the de facto leader in getting police programs through the commission. He is an enemy of the community and he needs to go. Now let's move on to Chief Moore. Your ass needs to go too. On the topic of George Floyd, if this department was truly ashamed and disgusted by the George Floyd Valentine, then why haven't you released the names of the officers who made and distributed the Valentine? We want their names. How can there be any accountability if we don't have their names? If this happened in any other agency of the city, these names would be released. We also demand the names of the officers who traveled to DC the first week of January be released, all right? If they didn't do anything wrong like you claimed, then release their names. They should be able to stand by their actions. Chief Moore hasn't even told us if they're suspended or if they've been taken out of the field, nothing, because he's still trying to figure out ways to cover this all up. How about this new report claiming that there are 0 arrests made by the LAPD related to immigration enforcement in 2020? How can we trust that number when Chief Pig Moore doesn't even know the difference between 74 and 639? In fact, he literally just asked Commissioner Calanche to do the math for him on LAPD officers getting vaccinated. And let's not forget that this report comes from the same department that didn't substantiate one report of racial profiling either in 2020. Now, Commissioner Decker, I find it very insulting that you would assume that the public doesn't know how Zoom works. 2 weeks ago, you claimed that the commission has no control over the public comment queue. You need to speak on that process as the lead commissioner here. And since you're not clear on it, put it on public record so we know that it's clear that the public, that we know that you don't randomly select people. This process should be transparent and the public should be able to see who is virtually in line for public comment. How is this commission actively addressing any of these issues? The fact that this commission limits public comment to 45 minutes in a city of 4 million, the fact that this commission holds its meeting at the same time as the city council and board of supervisor, and this commission has been and continues to strategically pick speakers from the queue. When are we gonna hear from Dr. Melina Abdullah?
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Zach Sherwin, followed by Heather C.
Yeah, after taking a look at the agenda, I think I'd like to speak to all of the items on it.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, thanks so much. I just want to start by saying how silly this 45-minute public comment business is. There's a lot of people who want to speak. They don't get time to open it up like you did before you started taking advantage of this pandemic to limit public comment. You're the citizen's voice in police affairs. Commissioner Decker, I just want to also point out that it's kind of interesting that you jumped right in with calling that last speaker off topic. It's the first time that's happened in months, and just kind of want to note that it happened, when we were talking about Commissioner Soberoff. Moving to the chief's report, I'd like to congratulate Chief Moore on his brand new talking point about opportunists. It's a word that we heard a couple times today. And Chief, it takes one to know one. Your own opportunism with regard to this city's budget, and you're exploiting this moment of being defunded by $150 million to throw all this scare tactics around, the prowlers you referred to earlier who are lurking in the foliage outside people's homes. That's small potatoes opportunism. But I'd like to move on to public comment and say that echo the call and say Steve Soberoff needs to step down immediately. These emails that have come out in the past week confirm this man's corruption and the degree to which he is compromised. He's conferring with the head of the police union about how he should vote. He's corresponding behind the scenes with Chief Moore, getting approval from the LAPPL. How egregiously out of line does this man need to act before something happens? Commissioner Decker, other commissioners, we're looking to you for action. I'm gonna stop talking, and I certainly hope that you end this charade about not having any control over who gets called and it being completely random, and indeed to put on speakers like Dr. Melina Abdullah. This commission is a sham. You should all be ashamed, especially you, Steve. Nope, I rescind it. You can, I invite you to equally share in this shame. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Heather C., followed by Q. Jean-Marie.
Yes, good morning. All items and public comment, general comment, please.
3 minutes.
Thank you. The LAPD needs more ability to enforce the encampments. The encampments are dangerous and they're a magnet for drugs, sex trafficking, violent crimes. They're not safe and they're out of control now in our neighborhoods, and LAPD needs the ability to have them, cleaned and minimized. The promotions need to be beefed up within LAPD. The number of detectives, they're so short that nothing's getting done and everyone's behind. It's a disservice to the community. I feel like, there's people that don't want the police to be proactive. So all the crime is resulting in reports being taken instead of arrests. And then there's no manpower to actually investigate the reports. So it's basically making LA a free-for-all for crime. And with the passage of the Biden bill now, supporting, city government, public safety, we can't have any more cuts. We cannot have any more defunding of police resources. We need more police right now, not less. The Hamid Khan lawsuit is bullshit, despite what he says, and it's a waste of tax dollars, and everybody knows it, including every commissioner on this board. We need to stop wasting taxpayer money on frivolous lawsuits. The crime might be down this past week, but overall it's way up. When nicer communities in parts of Los Angeles are being, gang members are barging into restaurants and whipping guns out and robbing people and of dogs, and I mean we have a serious problem right now that needs to be addressed. And police commissioners, we really need you guys to step up and start addressing those problems, instead of worrying about taking resources away and finding ways to restrict LAPD officers from doing their job. Yes, I support LAPD, support the officers, the rank and file, and definitely Chief Moore. Thank you. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Q. Jean-Marie, followed by Patrick.
Good morning. My name is Q. Jean-Marie from the Church Without Walls, also with Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. I would like to speak on all of the items, including public comments, please. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Please proceed.
Okay. So as it relates to crime, a recent study of 34 cities across the nation documented a 30% increase on an average compared to 2019. But just as there's no way to pin the 84% increase in Lincoln, Nebraska, or the 61% increase in Louisville, Kentucky, to reforms enacted in Sacramento, it is similarly unreasonable to blame those reforms for 34% increase last year in Los Angeles. This is a national crisis that deserves immediate action. So there are those who are blaming Black folks for the effects of COVID-19. And I'm reading from an article by Akila Shariels. Community-based violence reduction is an essential component of public safety, and in Los Angeles, where many homicides go unsolved, the need for new approaches to public safety is urgent. Nearly $2 billion spent every year on LAPD, more than $3.5 billion will go to county sheriffs this year, and additional billions are spent on probations, etc. So violent crime is up in Los Angeles, but the increase is not due to any reforms enacted over the past several years. Crime rates, and particularly homicides, are up everywhere, right? $150 million, some allocated, as the chief said, for city workers. We hear about LA Live and them needing police. LA Live doesn't need police. They have their own security, right? I heard one of the chiefs said last week that we cannot do, you cannot do your work without trust and collaboration and the help of the public. My question is, which public? Which public? Because if you treat all public members the same, then you may have a good argument. Right? We also suspect that we are being silenced for speaking up, and it's an attempt to diffuse our outrage regarding the Valentine's issue with George Floyd, and also folks are sweeping the fact that we have LAPD officers who was in Washington, and all of this continues to compound trauma upon trauma on our community. Lastly, in Newark, New Jersey, which is one of the one of the few major cities in America that is significantly invested in community-based public safety, in 2019, their crimes decreased, and there were a 23% increase in homicide. The number in New York.
Thank you. Next, we have Patrick, followed by Son of the Pitch.
I'd like to speak on the chief's report and general comment, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm sure, commissioners, you've heard us say many times, what's the plan? You know, crime, as you're well aware, is rising. Briggs, Commissioner Briggs, you seem to be the most open-minded on the commission, and you're the one that really has public safety in mind. So hopefully we can all come up with a plan together, and Commissioner Briggs, I'm looking at you to maybe lead that forward. Commissioner Kalanche, you know, I request that you resign from the police commission. Every single time you speak, it's all about money, 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 money for your nonprofit. I don't think that you have public safety in mind. I think that you just want to see more dollars go into your pocket. So please, Kalanche, resign. But, you know, while the department is suffering, you know, vehicle computer systems, they need to be upgraded. I did like the comment or the question from Soboroff about, or whomever it was from, about Decker, about the front desk being open. I think that was a good question, because I feel that a lot of community members have been talking about opening the front desks, and they're really getting upset that they're not open. So if they can get open as soon as possible, that would be great. It's not good that, you know, our human trafficking units are being cut. You know, people are suffering and they're being terrorized out there. We need more crime suppression units. You know, over in 77th, I think there's not even enough patrol cars, because I think that they get broken and they don't get replaced. You know, the department is suffering. The officers are suffering a lot. We really also need to pay attention to the victims that are being affected by this rise in crime, and these are mostly Black and brown victims. And you know, it's really, it doesn't matter what color they are, but they're victims. I just want to say that we need to support our police officers and do the best that we can, and hopefully that this commission can work with city council. Whatever, we got to come up with a plan. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Son of the Pitch, followed by Gina Viola.
Hello, I want to start with the item number 1 with the discussion about the report of the chief. And then I would like to discuss item number 2 to a conversation on public comment period. Then I would move on to analyze the agenda items A, B, C, D, E, F. And then I will finally conclude with some remarks on closed sessions, item A and B. Thank you.
3 minutes.
Morning, Chief. I heard that you were in the hospital the other day. I wish you a speedy recovery. The department, the city, the safety, we need you, please. And then I want to share with you, please, can I, Chief, can I have your a couple seconds attention, please? At the earlier beginning of the pandemic, I experienced a hate crime regarding, they are all verbal, which is people are telling me, go back to my fucking country. People are telling me, stop bringing the fucking virus. Everything are verbal, which is I do not care too much. That's how I taught my kids. Do not argue, do not insult, just move on, just go, just leave them. But right now, Chief, I'm really scared, and I'm a little scared after several incidents on the Oakland. We see the San Francisco, we see the San Diego, they just push you to the ground even though you are 91 years old. So Chief, right now, this is no longer a verbal crime anymore. The nation average, we are talking about thousands of percent. Well, I assuming everyone read the numbers. So please, Chief, I would request you a couple minutes to think, take a look at those issues, because I am not afraid of verbal. I'm not afraid of verbal discrimination, but I'm really afraid of those physical assault. And then also, I would like to speak on some sort of Asian community on behalf. The reason why that all Hispanic people, they are very strong is because they have their leader, Cesar Chavez. The Cesar Chavez teach everyone to protest in a peacefully and unite everyone together. The reason why that a Black community, they are very strong is because they have Martin Luther King, which is they taught Black people to protest in a peaceful manner. But in Asian community, we have no such person. We have no leader. We see the San Francisco protest, 200 people. We see that Monterey Park protest, 50 people. But when we talk about Cesar Chavez protest, we see millions. When we talk about George Floyd protest, we see millions. The only reason why Asians are being a target of the crime is because those criminals understand the simple idea. Asians do not fight. Asians are weak, and Asians are coward. So Asian people, please stand up now. Please stand up, all Asian. And then regarding the community reinvestment, and yes, reparation payment is good, except within just a few generations, the continents of America were virtually emptied of their native inhabitants. Some academics estimate that approximately 20 million native people have died, up to 95% of the population of the Native Americans. So we are talking about a reparation, we are talking about community reinvestment. Native Indians, they are the #1. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Gina, followed by Adam.
Hi, I would have spoken to all 3 items, but I would like to cede my time to Dr. Molina Abdullah, who I know is in the queue with her hand raised. Thank you.
Okay. Next speaker, we have Adam.
Hello.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
Oh, good morning, Becky. I would really enjoy speaking on all items, including public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Super. Hey, Chief, I saw a video on Twitter of a maskless LAPD supervisor the other day denying that 500,000 people have died from COVID. Real cool leadership style you have there, dude. Also, your captain, Jonathan Tom, that's not a significant action for the chief's report. It's noticeable that Chief Moore, you didn't mention that as part of an investigation into gun stolen from the LAPD gun store, a search warrant was served at one of your captain's house 2 weeks ago. Is that not significant incident worthy of a report? Decker, Bonner, Kalanche, Briggs, is that not a significant incident worthy of your questions as in your role being citizens' voice in police affairs? I didn't mention Steve because we certainly know where his loyalties lie. Isn't that right, Steve? On July 28th, 2020, Steve, you said, because I sit on the board of Weingart, I have checked with people from both sides, both from Weingart and the LAPD, about my ability to vote for this donation. And it's been authorized from both sides. I do not vote for anything having to do with the LAPD. I recuse myself, but these grants never came to the board. If Weingart in fact donated to these, I don't know. Yet on May 19th, the previous year, Steve, you forwarded an email from then Weingart CEO Fred Ali that outlines the successful approval of Weingart grants going to LAPD through the Police Foundation. In addition to a meeting Fred Ali outlines he had at Pacific Dining Car with former Police Commissioner Matt Johnson, he also says, and I quote, Steve Soboroff has also been very helpful and supportive, a great example of how a foundation can use its voice influence to get stuff done, end quote. When you forwarded this email to Chief Moore, you wrote, and I quote, please keep confidential until you hear directly from one of the foundations. Weingart in September will be approving $200,000 over 2 years, end quote. You are a liar, Steve, and you being on this board shows how this commission is absolutely corrupted, that Mayor Garcetti and yes, you, Eileen Decker, approve of and see this corruption as your role. All the typewriters and successful sons in the world won't change the fact that you are a corrupt hump of white male mediocrity getting played by people that are incredibly smarter than you. Congrats, my dude.
Let's move on to the next speaker, Madam Secretary.
Okay, next we have Jane Doe, followed by Betty Lay.
Good morning, Commissioners and Madam Secretary and Executive Director Tifank. My name is Stacy Dawson Stearns, and I would like to cede my time to Dr. Melina Abdullah, who you have silenced repeatedly, and I wish for you to call upon her and give her my time. Thank you very much. Also, Steve Soboroff sucks and should resign or be fired. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Betty Lay, followed by Dan.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
Chief's report and public comment, please.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. First off, I'm really pleased to see that Chief Moore is back at the helm and that he stays healthy. I support LAPD. I support Chief Moore. Everybody needs to understand how dangerous these home encampments are, and our law enforcement needs to be able to deal with it due to drugs, sex trafficking, violent crimes, things like that. And we need to get promotions started. We need more officers. We've got to get back to where we were. These unarmed organizations is not what we need. We need our brave men and women in blue to be out there. We need them to stay safe. We need them to be proactive and get back out on the street where they belong. Having absolutely no manpower, it just doesn't, it doesn't make any sense. We have to get back to where we were. I support LAPD. I support Chief Moore, and commissioners, please come up with a plan. Let's get rid of what the Public Safety Committee is doing with City Council. They're just causing more issues day after day. Thank you. Everybody stay healthy. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. Next we have Dan, followed by Bill.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
all items in general, but I have a point of order first. That should be 3 minutes, not 2 minutes. Thank you. Point of order first. Can you hear me okay? Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We can all hear you. Thank you.
For point of order, and you shouldn't be running my clock on a point of order. Ms. Decker, anybody who Ms. Decker tries to censor unfairly, file a claim with City Attorney Mike Fewer's office. Why are you running my clock when I'm making a point of order?
Sir, if you're speaking on something within the jurisdiction of the commission, your time will run.
You're speaking on my time, put it back.
Sir, your time is running. Please
Okay,
proceed.
okay, I will file a claim against the department for this, for running my public comment time on a point of order. People file a small claim suit for $1,000 each time Decker or anybody violates your First Amendment right for not letting you speak the way you want to make your point. And I'm going to do that today, and I'll see you in small claims. Moving on. Good to see you back, Chief Moore. We don't always agree, but I'm glad to hear you're doing okay. Last year, you guys paid me $100 for each of 89 instances of violating my personal data. You guys did it again, and now I'm suing you for $2,500 for each instance. I'll see you in small claims. Why is Steve Soboroff on this commission? By the way, where did he disappear to? Mr. Soboroff still owes thousands and thousands of dollars for intact dog license fees and late fees going back for years. When I last raised the issue, he tried to sick his son, Jake Soboroff, to attack me and disingenuously claimed that I tried to extort him, except when I dared Mr. Soboroff to file a complaint for extortion with the DA. He and Jake Soboroff both proved to be paper tigers. So that is a reflection of this man's cowardice and his willingness to not pay his debt to the city. He is welshing on debt to the city. Commissioners, for City Watch LA, I recently wrote a column, LAPD forgets its Eric Garcetti alibis, which focuses on a bogus investigation by your Internal Affairs Division. 131 days ago, I received a letter from this department saying that my participation in its investigation is essential to finding out what happened and why your agency is interfering with my reporting on an alleged domestic incident between Mayor Garcetti and another man. It's 131 days later. I have made contact with the detective. She refuses to respond to me responding to her letter. Why is your Internal Affairs department issuing bogus, you need to cooperate letters when in fact, when I reach out to them and I catch them, they never actually launch an investigation? And Ms. Decker, I will see the department in small claims for trying to censor me for making salient points in my own way during this meeting. You're going to find that the city's going to spend a lot of resources defending that.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Bill, followed by Michelle Wetland.
Great, thank you. I'd like to speak on all items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
It's disconcerting to hear the chief's report that the staffing numbers are lower than what has been projected. And frankly, I believe the numbers would be even lower than they are today if officers were able to retire because of the backlog that's occurring right now in the personnel department. We're having a situation with the loss of confidence in the department and the city by quite a few officers that are looking just to get, cut and get out and be gone. So I'd like to know if the commission has done anything to look into officer morale and the impact that that's going to have on projected losses. Because if we're down this number now and people keep retiring at the rate that they are retiring, it's going to be very, very hard to do academy classes to get those numbers back up. It's also disconcerting to see if the retiring officers, how many of them are Blacks and other minorities. And again, given the current feeling that a lot of people are expressing towards the police department, it's going to be very hard to backfill some of those positions and maintain the diversity numbers the department is going for. So I asked the commissioners what plans you have to address these staffing levels and address also the morale issues within the department. Another thing going with staffing is that right now the numbers are very bad for a lot of things like shootings and robberies, that sort of thing. but we're also having a tremendous number of deaths occurring due to traffic accidents. If you look at the deployment of the traffic divisions of the LAPD, they're primarily during the week, Monday through Friday, during the early part of the day. That may have made sense at one time when a lot of people were racing to the office and traffic was so heavy for business. But right now, at nighttime and on weekends, you would be hard pressed and have to really work hard to get a traffic citation for speed in the city. So again, ask the department and the police commissioners to please look at the deployment schedules of the traffic officers and make sure that there is somebody out there at night, somebody out there on weekends. We've just had another fatality here in the Valley this weekend, excessive rate of speed, somebody running a red light. This is going to keep continuing if we just stay with the status quo of a model that worked 2-3 years ago before the pandemic. Now the roads are emptier because people are staying home, people are speeding more, they're getting killed, and LAPD is still working the old model that everybody's going to the office Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Finally, I thank the commissioners for their service, and I'm sorry that you have to endure so much personal attack on each and every week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Michelle Wetland, followed by Ken Barnes.
Hi, public comment, Chief's report, 3A and 3C.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Will you allow Dr. Melina Abdullah to speak today? What is it going to take to provide transparency in this public comment process? Chief Moore, when I think on you and your comments, I think to myself, where do I begin? It's just too much for 3 minutes. I just asked this body, what will it take for you to recommend that Chief Moore resigns? Steve Sobroff appears to have left this meeting today. Did he resign? Why is Steve Sobroff still a commissioner? Sobroff fails to represent the community and actively works against community demands by seeking funding for LAPD. Do you all believe that Commissioner Decker covering for Sobroff's corruption makes her guilty as well? We read Sobroff's corrupt emails and text messages violating the Brown Act. That as a former deputy mayor under Garcetti and U.S. attorney, Sobroff should understand. But he outright lies about his participation in generating donations for LAPD through the foundation. What else does he lie about? As far as the audits and annual reports, that they do not prevent LAPD's misuse of technology and do not prevent the surveillance of community members and the storage of information captured by drones, all of which the community rejects. In just 1 week, around 1,000 emails were sent in opposition of surveillance. Instead of yielding to data, the Constitution, the voices of stakeholders, impacted community members, and science, this board yielded to LAPD. Why? Was it Sobroff? Was it Palantir? LAPD gathers data on folks with Palantir, the same data analysis platform commonly used by ICE, from suspicious activity reports to license plate data to CCTV images. That information is kept and filed in local and regional databases where it can be used for the purposes of locating individuals for investigation, arrest, and deportation. Where is this presentation of data? How long will this body hide corruption when its purpose is to protect from its systemic impact and harm? It's time to reimagine public safety. I yield my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Ken Barnes, followed by Javier Emorcio.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them in public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
So this body is supposed to be the citizen's voice of police affairs. So just a couple of questions. When Steve Sobroff schedules fancy secret dinners to discuss fundraising for the police, why were the citizens not made aware of that? When he was raising those funds, was Steve using the citizen's voice? When Steve was emailing about keeping confidential the fact that he was instrumental in getting more funds for LAPD, was he using the citizen's voice then? I mean, I realize he has left to avoid listening, but what you're hearing right now are the voices of actual citizens. Of course, Steve said he didn't have anything to do with donations from the Weigart Foundation, even though that their CEO said that he was influential in getting stuff done. including $200,000 for the LAPD. So at the very least, we can all be clear that Steve Soborov is a liar. I know he doesn't really give a crap about anything besides retweeting the LAPD and vintage typewriters. So I will just look to the rest of you, since you're actually here, and ask a couple of questions. How is it helpful to have someone that is a liar be the citizen's voice in police affairs? How does it help build trust in the community when you have a liar who is actively raising funds for police and ignoring the violence perpetrated over and over by the LAPD? If the rest of you are fine ignoring the lying, you are complicit in these lies. I would also like to applaud Chief Moore and this board for recognizing International Women's Day yesterday. Let's also take the time to remember that 40% of police officers self-report that they have participated in an act of domestic violence, from a study from the National Center for Women in Policing. And from the story today that the chief shared about an officer shooting his gun at a party at his house after an altercation, I think we can all see pretty clearly how the violence that the LAPD perpetrates in our streets also finds its way to harm their children, spouses, and families. I think it's laughable that in order to build trust, Chief Moore suggests we need more cops. I mean, let's just think about this. Just answer the question, how does more cops equal more trust? Is there math? Is there science? So I would like to know how that all works out. And I would ask the board to not just accept that sort of ridiculous proposal that more police equals trust. That's just stupid. And the 45-minute public comment limit. I reject the LAPD's use of drones. I reject the LAPD gathering information on the immigrant community that they share with FBI, ICE, and Customs Border Control. Call on Dr. Melina Abdullah. There are 2 people have called for her, so she gets 6 minutes in public time. Black Lives Matter, y'all kind of suck.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Javier Hermosillo, followed by Alex C. Javier. Okay, we'll come back to Javier.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, hi, yes.
Okay, fine. Great, thank you. I just want to address a couple of issues that are of great concern to me. One is that I think the comment time of 15 minutes, 3 minutes of 45 minutes means that at 3 minutes apiece, you have 15 people talking. If you shaved a minute off of that, you could increase the speakers by 50% to 22. And, every call, I've been on these calls for months, and I believe that I may be the first Latino to get an opportunity to speak. And we constantly hear about Dr. Abdul, and everybody has a voice, but Latinos right now don't have very much of a voice in Los Angeles. The focus is elsewhere. And I think that considering Latinos are 50% of the population, the fact that we still have attacks on Latino vendors, vicious attacks. We heard the gentleman speak earlier about the attacks on Asians. And I think that I would beg of you to give a broader voice on this comment period to people of different ethnicities, because we have the same people getting in, saying the same thing, trying to give time to somebody else, and just attacking the chief. And we need better than that. We're the only major city in the country with no, major crimes. Forbes magazine just found a story that Los Angeles has the 3 top most violent neighborhoods, also number 6. Two in San Francisco, 2 in Kansas City, and Portland is like number 9. And we know the violence we saw in Portland. In terms of the homeless violence and confrontation, that's increasing. I know it's seen as more of a social problem, but it's tying up our police resources a lot. And I think that, the negativity that's put on our police officers The chief has the dubious, requirement to recruit from the human race, and we have problems, regardless of what they take. But the gentleman who spoke about the Asian attacks, there are other people that are getting attacked, and I think that from a policy standpoint, your boss, the mayor, has got to stand up for all Angelenos, and we have to be supportive of our police. Yeah, there are problems, but and the last thing I want to mention is the traffic division. I was involved in an accident, not my fault. 4 hours I waited for south traffic, and finally we just went our own way. And so thank you for the opportunity to speak, but we need to address multiple issues here on a regular basis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Alex C., followed by Melina Abdullah. Alex C.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
I'm going to speak on all items as well as a general public comment.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you to Soboroff and Briggs for coming back to the meeting after we had to tell you to come back. I'm glad everyone's bringing up the horrifying things that we saw from Steve Soboroff. And we already know LAPD is corrupt, so it's great to just have more evidence about it. This commission, like many has said, is supposed to represent the community. Well, the community wants more transparency and less police. Also, to all the gross NIMBYs calling in with the same script, you need to get creative. I work with the unhoused. More policing causes more pain in our community, especially because LAPD doesn't wear masks. The solution is less police and more community care. That's where our money should go. Yet Soboroff continuously votes in favor of more funding for LAPD. You don't need and you don't deserve any more money to harass our community. I know the last caller was speaking about people in the Latin American and Hispanic communities being attacked. The LAPD is an equal opportunity offender. It is born from racism. Nothing has changed since 1965. Nothing has changed since 1992. We need to defund you. Abolish you would be great because you're clearly not representing the community. LAPD is continually wandering around harassing peaceful protesters only when they aren't white supremacists, mind you, and they refuse to wear masks when several of your officers have died of COVID. And yet one of your sergeants was caught on camera denying that COVID even exists. The officer who was representing the department talked so much about diversity and not tolerating hate speech. Well, your own police princess, Tony McBride, posted transphobic hate speech to her Instagram. So maybe if you won't fire her for killing an innocent man who had been in a car crash and just needed help, you'll fire her for being homophobic. And if you don't fire her, that's proof that you're okay with her hate speech. I yield the rest of my time to Dr. Melina Abdullah.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Melina Abdullah, followed by William E.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay. So one, I'm thankful that I can finally be on. I've been trying to get on these calls for months. So this is the first time in months I've been let on. I want to be clear, we all know how Zoom works. You could actually put the queue up at the beginning so we could see who's being called on. Also, you don't need to share screen for the entire call or for the entire public comment period. It makes it very difficult for people to actually see the commissioners, and maybe that's the intent. I want to address the funding request that Chief Moore offered. And we want to be clear that the $150 million that was defunded from LAPD was done in the name of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and in Los Angeles, we want to lift up Waukesha Wilson, Kenny Watkins, and so many others. And so we want to make sure that it's clear that that money was supposed to go to support Black communities. That was what was pledged by the mayor. That money would go to support Black communities. And so it's not supposed to be just for everything. It's not supposed to be for a skate park. It's not supposed to be for any kind of slush fund that folks are thinking of, and it's absolutely not supposed to be for the recapturing of LAPD funding. So we want to defund the police. And Michael Moore talked about the importance of intervention work. Intervention work cannot be done by police. It has to be done by community-driven public safety. And so we'd like to see you amend your budget proposal to put money in the things that you are saying are valuable. Don't just trot out Skip Townsend and not fund his work. Don't just trot out Second Call and Reverence Project and not fund their work. Adjust your budget so that you can fund the things that you're admitting are important and impactful. Finally, Steve Soboroff, we know that you've been coordinating your votes with Jamie McBride, who's the father of the murderous Tony McBride, who stole the life of Daniel Hernandez. We know that you've been coordinating your votes with Michael Moore. You're supposed to oversee policing, not coordinate with policing and figure out how they can do more corruption. So we're demanding that you step down. Soboroff, step down or be removed right now. And then finally for Eileen Decker, when do you plan to go back to in-person meetings? We'd like to see a timeline for that. We know that you're using technology, again, to stack the deck with police officers and police sympathizers and silence the voice of the people. And so we're demanding that you give us a timeline in short order.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have William E., followed by Rudy Melendez.
And that will be the last speaker, Rudy Melendez. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Which items? Oh, all items. Yes, I think that's appropriate. Yes. So I can't see your pretty faces when I'm speaking. Isn't that a shame? And well, you can't see mine. My wonderful yellow.
Please get on
hair
topic,
and
sir.
my fur.
Sir, please get on topic or we'll move to the next speaker.
Yeah, now you're angering Miss Decker. Now stay on topic. Oh, thank you, sir. Yes. All right. Yes, we have the regular agenda items. I would like to hear the reports first and then give public comment. Yeah, right. So 3A, fuck 3A. 3B, we support 3B. 3C, the small unarmed aerial system, we thoroughly support that. Oh, that's a fun one. You get to fly a little tiny remote controlled little flying saucer over the homeless criminals and get to drop pepper spray. Yes, that's Michael Moore's pet project. You have delivered, Michael. Well done. Yes. Even though working with those chemicals led to your hospital visit. But we're glad you're doing better. And then, of course, finally, Dr. Abdullah gets to speak. Victim survivor of a vicious attack by the former DA's husband.
Sir, get on topic or we'll move to the next speaker. That's your last warning, sir.
Well, you want to turn it over to me? Yes, I think I should turn it over to my attorney. Okay, all right, so let's just get to it. Can I do general public comments so I don't have to go through this bullshit? Yeah, I just want to know that there is an investigation right now that you are stacking these meetings at the same time in the same place with the intent to subvert public comment using, according to your legal memorandum, non-content-based, non-discriminatory rules. But the problem is you are constructively censoring by using these non-content-based rules, such as time restrictions on speakers, overall speaking time, with the specific intent to deprive the people who speak, who you do not agree with their content. That is a First Amendment retaliation claim. That is a Bain Act claim. Now, you own all the judges in Los Angeles are all paid off and in your pocket, so we can't go there. All of your people at the Moss building are paid. So we're going to find a proper venue upon which to hear these matters. That will be in Washington, D.C. very shortly. So Anyway, you guys enjoy yourselves. You have no idea what the fuck I'm even talking about. I yield my time. Fuck you, Steve Soboroff. Resign. Anything?
Okay, thank you. And our final speaker, Rudy Melendez.
Hi, good morning. Thank you very much. I just wanted to make a brief public comment and speak to the police chief's report. I think everybody that was paying attention heard very clearly what Chief Moore is asking of this commission and the community. And I think it's a reasonable ask. And I hope that members here in the community that support law enforcement would encourage this commission to follow what the chief of police is asking. The Los Angeles Police Department is the most progressive police department in the entire country. It's not perfect, but they are the leaders in our country. And I know there's a lot of people that make public comment every week that hate the police. They don't understand what police go through. Police make mistakes, but the end result is crime is skyrocketing in Los Angeles. And we've already seen $1 billion of public safety money disappear from the county. So for people that want to complain about what law enforcement does, they need to talk to the county supervisor and the department that actually provides those kinds of services to our community. LAPD, people call them because they don't know what to do. They don't know how to deal with the situation. Oftentimes it's homeless people in their community. And the police are important. They're an important part of the component. They have mental evaluation units and SMART teams because that's what community members want. So let's get on board what the chief of police is asking for us. And then just one brief comment about one of the commissioners sort of made a scoffing remark about $1 million going to a skate park in the valley. Well, if you don't understand, kids need outlets. They need things to do that keeps them off the streets. If you can't understand why that is an important part of our community, then you have no business being on this commission. Thank you very much for my time. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the speakers who came today. We do appreciate it. Before we go on to the agenda, Mr. Teefank, there remains questions regarding the order of speakers. Can you just briefly explain the process again? Thank you.
Yes, Madam President. As I understand it, when you ask the board secretary to open the room, she does so by activating the Zoom to open the room. And the stacking of those people that get into the room is randomly done by Zoom. We have no control over it. The board secretary does not manipulate that in any way at all. It is a randomness as they get called into the room. That is the best I can explain it.
Thank you. And then as soon as you raise your hand, you get in queue. Is that correct, Mr. Teefank, as far as we know? And she just goes in order. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. That's the process. And that's the process we'll continue to follow. Thank you, Mr. Teefank. Let's move on to the regular agenda items. Let's begin with item 3A. Madam Secretary, please call up the department spokesperson for item 3A. I believe that's Commander Labrada, who will be joining us today. And as soon as the commander's here. Commander Labrada, welcome. Good morning. Good morning, sir. Can you begin, sir, by providing the commission with a brief overview and summary of the report and its key components?
Sure. Good morning, commissioners, Mr. Smith, Mr. Teefank, Chief of Police. Thank you very much for having me on the call this morning. My name is Al Labrada. I was recently appointed as the acting commanding officer of Operations Central Bureau. As part of that, additionally, with the retirement of Assistant Chief Arcos, I was blessed to be selected as the department's liaison to our immigrant communities and to work alongside our advocates. I have worked for many years with many of the communities and advocates that represent our immigrant communities and undocumented residents in Los Angeles, many of whom are on the call today and were provided a copy of this report in advance. As an immigrant and formerly undocumented resident in the city, I understand many of the challenges and concerns of our immigrant residents. LAPD has been working proactively in ensuring our personnel understand the importance of LAPD's role, our steadfast commitment to our communities, and the importance of constitutional policing to all residents of LA, regardless of their background, place of birth, legal status, and to consistently remind our residents through our public and transparent actions that we will not participate in civil immigration efforts. Our policies have been directed to help ensure ongoing support and compliance with Special Order 40. Through the leadership of Chief Michael Moore, our continued focus remains on ensuring continuing education, outreach, discussion, and more importantly, proactive responses to our immigration advocates and community leaders through our ongoing effort and work in partnership with community leaders and immigration advocates throughout the city. Our ongoing commitment remains focused on the building of trust, demonstration of agency transparency, and outreach to our immigrant communities to ensure that they know that we are not enforcing immigration laws and we are not continuing to support, and we will continue to support the safety and well-being of all residents, regardless of their background. Although now with the inability to hold in-person events, we have continued to support our communities and organizations with virtual community forums, outreach events, and various language media segments addressing the community concerns of safety, trust, as well as providing numerous public safety announcements, reiterating our ongoing efforts to remind residents we are not here to do the work of ICE. We currently are also finalizing a Spanish video loop of about 45 minutes of Spanish PSAs that will be shared with the Latin American consulates to be played in the consulate waiting rooms. Our ongoing focus remains ensuring that the victims and witnesses are not afraid to contact the police or report crimes, with the focus being on public safety for all, regardless of their immigration status. In the past, we have seen slight reductions of some crimes being reported, but overall, with the higher number of calls for service throughout the department, we feel that the messaging is getting out and our support for all victims is being shared. The efforts of LAPD remain consistent with the principles set forth in the California's Value Act, with the department commitment to protecting the public from crime and other harm through collaborative partnerships, and with constitutional policing principles, including the fair and impartial enforcement of the law, regardless of a person's race, ethnicity, national origin, or civil immigration status. California Values Act also placed restrictions on the department and participation of local law enforcement agencies in federal immigration enforcement. However, most of those restrictions were already in place with LAPD prior to its implementation. We continue to support public safety, and we've adhered to even prior to the Act's implementation back in January 2018. Our practices throughout 2020 related to ICE detainers remain consistent in ensuring compliance. Our department received 1,268 detainer requests for the 12-month period in 2020. And we honored one detainer, which was the result of a federal criminal judicial warrant due to a conviction of an aggravated felony. We also had one ICE transfer, which is the one mentioned, no ICE interview request received or honored, no ICE release notification request received or honored. As part of the joint task force participation of operations, the primary purpose of the Joint Law Enforcement Task Force is not immigration enforcement. Our enforcement or investigative duties are related to a violation of state or federal laws unrelated to immigration enforcement, and aimed at helping us focus on those serious crimes affecting the safety of our residents. In the department's ongoing efforts to address violent crime, gang crime, weapons, narcotics, trafficking, human trafficking, child pornography, through joint operations with ATF, FBI, U.S. Secret Service, U.S. Customs and Enforcement, and Homeland Security investigations. We can report that we have had no immigration enforcement arrests, while continuing to make numerous arrests for serious and violent crimes that could significantly impact the public safety of our residents, but which we were all unrelated to any individual's immigration status. The investigative task force reported in the Immigration Enforcement Report, which you all received, dated February 8th, 2021, the details of the arrests related to efforts by Office of Operations, Counterterrorism and Special Operations Bureau, and Detective Bureau. LAPD total number of task forces is comprised of total department-wide 24. Arrests for non-immigration enforcement crimes was a total of 946. Arrests for immigration enforcement, 0. Enforcement of criminal immigration laws, the LAPD's procedure for a violation of illegal reentry after conviction of an aggravated assault remains significantly monitored under the following procedures. During a lawful legal detention, it is unrelated to the immigration status of one. They may detain for a reasonable period to determine if the suspect has prior conviction. After confirming the prior serious or violent convictions, officers may notify the area watch commander regarding the illegal entry and warrant. The one incident referenced earlier It was on December 14, 2020. Not too long ago, the individual was legally detained for a trespass violation. When the individual was checked for wants and warrants, the officers discovered the individual had an outstanding full extradition warrant for Title 8 U.S. 1326 AB1, illegal reentry after deportation and removal due to a conviction of an aggravated felony. The individual was transported to Devonshire area where they verified the individual had a federal criminal judicial warrant. The officers verified the warrant was associated with that detained individual via the NCIC system, the immigration violators record, and the NCIC warrant was verified using fingerprints, as well as the image on file for both the warrant and the individual. The warrant for the arrest was issued on June 12, 2020, signed by the Judge Magistrate Jacqueline Chulahan. Proper procedures were adhered to that consistent with the Chief of Police Notice December 2017 and Detective Bureau Notice 2018. I will at this time answer any questions, Commissioners.
Thank you, Commander Labrada. Appreciate that overview of the report and summary, particularly as you described the efforts undertaken by the department to ensure all immigrants, regardless of status, feel comfortable coming forward to report a crime. Much appreciate that summary. Members of the commission, do you have any questions for Commander Labrada? If so, please let me know. I'm not seeing any indications. Very well. Thank you, Commander. Much appreciated. The requested board action is to approve the department's report. I will move it forward. Is there a second for that?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Very well, it passes. Thank you again, Commander Labrada, for that thorough
Thank you,
report.
Commissioners. Have a great day.
Thank you, sir.
I might, just for a moment, I want to congratulate Al Labrada for a seamless transition with the retirement of Chief Arcos. He has picked up, really based on his earlier years of collaboration and partnership with the immigrant community, particularly in Latin America, seamlessly. And during this time of such uncertainty, I'm really appreciative of it. And his report today, I think, demonstrates his continued commitment. And I do look forward to us getting the embassy or the consulates having that video in front of them very soon.
Very much. Thank you, Chief, and thank you for that. I think we've all seen Commander Labrada at work over many years, and today's presentation highlighted his continued dedication to his new assigned area. So thank you. Madam Secretary, we'll move on to item 3B, the department's report relative to the Ethics Enforcement Section Integrity Test Report. And I see a deputy chief is coming up, but I have a captain listed, so I'm not sure who's presenting, if it's one or multiple people. If you could turn your camera on and your microphone as well. There we go. Chief Marino, welcome, sir.
Good morning, Madam President, Commissioners, Mr. Tifank, and Chief, good morning. Madam President, Captain Mohammadi is also going to be presenting on this matter. So if we can bring him up.
Very well. We'll ask Madam Secretary, if you could bring up the captain, please. And Chief Marino, what was the name of the captain again?
Captain Mohammadi.
Okay, Captain Mohammadi, please. And we'll just give her a minute. Sometimes there's a lot of people, and if she didn't have that pre-designated, it sometimes can be a challenge.
Not a problem, ma'am.
Madam Secretary, if you're having a problem, just let me know.
Captain Mohammadi doesn't seem to be logged on. I saw him just a couple minutes ago, so.
Okay, so why don't we do this, Chief Marino, as long as you're okay, we'll see if the captain can re-log in. This happens from time to time. People get knocked out of the system, and we'll move on to the next matter. We'll go to item C first, and then we'll come back.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you,
apologies for the delay, Chief. Madam Secretary, if possible, could you bring up the department representatives on items 3C, the department's report relative to the small unmanned aerial system audit. I believe that's Deputy Chief Zarconi and Police Administrator 1, Trina Uzicker. And once Chief Sarconi and Ms. Unzicker are available, if you could turn your cameras on so we can see you, I'd appreciate it. There we go. And Chief Sarconi, if you're there, there we go. Welcome both of you. We've called up item 3C, the audit regarding the small unmanned aerial system audit. I'll turn it over to you for a brief summary of the report and the highlights of your findings. Thank you. We can't hear you, Ms. Unzicker, we can't hear you. Nope, still cannot hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, my apologies, Commissioner Decker. Good morning. My name is Trina Unzicker. I am the Commanding Officer of Audit Division. The report before you is regarding the small unmanned aerial system. This audit was performed as part of our calendar of 2020 audits. We assessed all of the aircraft deployments over an 18-month period between 2019 and 2020. What we found is that the department achieved 100% compliance with standards for the following objectives. Trained and certified employees piloted the craft. The aircraft deployments were permissible. Staff forwarded deployment logs within the required period of time. Deployments were documented and reviewed, and aircraft were inspected and inventoried. There were two objectives where the percent meeting standards was significantly lower, which were relative to approvals obtained before deployment and exclusive assignment of the aircraft. For those objectives, we're recommending that CTSOB revise and amend the department manual to address the issues that came up during the audit. It should be noted that there was a clarifying special order addressing some of these issues that was recently released. I also have with me in the room Sergeant Cindy Chow, who's the officer in charge who oversaw this audit. She's here along with me to answer questions regarding the audit, and I believe there are also representatives from CTSOB who can address questions regarding actions taken in response to our audit.
Thank you very much. Chief Sarconi, if I'm recalling correctly, in I believe it was December, the commission revised the policy that would correct the issue about the reporting system. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. The two items that we failed the audit for were basically sloppy language in the existing policy that we have since corrected. The intent of the approval was to make sure that a deputy chief, bureau chief, was the approving authority, and that did occur in all 11 instances. However, the language said a on-scene command officer and the commanding officer of CTSOB, and that has since been changed to just state that the approval has to be from the commanding officer of CTSOB or the bureau of the deploying entity, because other entities now will be going forward using SOS, that being Traffic Bureau. The other one was simply that it was a misunderstanding that the language talking about who can deploy it, it said that somebody deploying it had to have that the SUAS personally assigned to them. But what that meant was that only a trained remote pilot could properly deploy it. So we took out the confusing language about the particular drone being assigned to a particular person, because that was never the intent. We don't have enough drones to assign to each pilot. So that's been corrected, and there shouldn't be any issues going forward.
Right. And so I do recall you previously, you and your team previously presenting that to the commission when we reviewed the updated policy. And Chief Sarconi, based upon your review of the audit as well as the changes made, I just want to confirm that it is your belief that in moving forward, all the deficiencies found in the audit will be corrected by that change in language. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Okay, very good. Let me open it up to other commissioner questions if there are any. Let me see. I do not see any. Thank you. Thank you both very much. The requested board action is to approve the department's report. I'll move it forward. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very well, that passes 5-0. Thank you all very much. Madam Secretary, were you able to find all the individuals for item B?
Yes, Captain Mohammadi is here.
Oh, very good. Welcome back, Chief Marino. Welcome, Captain Mohammadi, and the representative of the department in the room. Please begin by on item, just as a reminder, everybody, we're now on item 3B, the department's report relative to the ethics enforcement section integrity test report. Welcome back, and if I can ask whoever is going to be presenting to give us an overview of the report.
Thank you, Commissioner. Madam President, in regards to the report that's in front of you, this is the ethics integrity report for the third and fourth quarter of 2020. Captain Mohammadi and Detective Curtis are available and will provide a brief in regards to that report. But before I throw that report over to them, I would just like to thank Terry and her team for the work that they've done over this last third and fourth quarter. As you will see and hear, there was a significant increase in the number of integrity tests that her unit conducted, specifically focusing on constitutional policing, applications of procedural justice, and service to the community by our members. So with that being said, Commissioners, I'd ask Captain Mohammadi and Detective Curtis to take it from here.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm going to go ahead and start with the 2020 year-end numbers and give you some of our accomplishments. In 2020, we conducted a total of 168 tests. This is a 20% increase from 2019. The 168 tests resulted in 321 employees being the subject of the test. This was a 13% increase in comparison to the subjects tested in 2019. I would like to highlight our focus on the constitutional observation tests in 2020. We had a total of 37 tests in 2020 in comparison to only 2 in 2019. This was a 1900% increase in this category. In 2020, we had a substantial increase also in evaluating the constitutionality of the employees' actions and the department policy procedure compliance during community encounters. Now, going back specifically to quarter 3 and quarter 4 of 2020 for this biannual report, we completed a total of 96 tests. This was a 66% increase in comparison to the same period in 2019 and a 33% increase in comparison to the first 6 months of 2020. The 96 tests resulted in 168 employees being the subject of these tests. This was a 29% increase in comparison to the same period of subjects tested in 2019. We had a total of 3 failures, which all resulted in personnel complaints. The failures were within 3 different bureaus of the department and were all for neglect of duty. We also had 11 password comments to the command, and the concerns that were observed during the test were brought up to the attention of the employee's commanding officer. One of our new procedure is for the commanding officer to be notified so they could take the proper corrective action. And as a part of our strategy to enhance the service, we do this in a timely manner. And I asked the commanding officer to reply back to me what the corrective action was, so we could include it in our documents for review at a later time. The password comments during this report included 3 body-worn video deviations, 2 personnel complaint intake documentations, 3 delay of service, 4 policy procedure deviations, and 1 subpar service. Our strategies for 2021 is to continue our focus on constitutional observations tests and increase that number furthermore. And also we want to really increase our testing of specialized units within the department. With that, I submit our report unless there are any further questions.
Thank you very much, Captain and Chief Marino. And a quick question for either of you before I open it up to the other commissioners that I see have questions. Can you just briefly explain why you believe you were successful in the last year of increasing the number of tests, 37%, along with then there was a corresponding number of officers that were also subject to the test. What was the change that was made in the last 6 months to a year that resulted in that?
Yes, ma'am. We changed our focus into increasing our total number of observational testing, which would evaluate the constitutionality, the procedural justice components of the stops. And it took a little bit of a learning curve for us to become very, very efficient at it. And with the leadership of Detective Curtis, our sharp focus in this matter, and us really honing our skill set in regards to doing this evaluation, we were able to increase that number. And we are on a trajectory to further even increase that number for the next report.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Commissioner Kalanche, did you have a question? I see your microphone is open. No. Commissioner Soboroff, question? No. All right, questions from commissioners, apologies. Commissioner Bonner, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just a quick one. First, appreciate the additional focus or attention on the constitutional policing issues. So just wanted to note that. I did have the question, if I'm understanding the report correctly, that that most of the tests were at the initiative of the Special Operations Division, I believe. And just looking at the table number 3 on page 6, wondering how do you make determinations as to which ones you'll address? And in particular, I note that there's no test in regard to unauthorized force or sexual misconduct. So just would appreciate a comment on those at least seemingly outlier areas.
Yes, sir. The majority of our testing, as you stated, were SOD initiatives, and that comes from various sources. One of the primary sources is by reviewing the personnel complaint intakes and looking at risk behaviors. We are involved in the process of some of the adjudications throughout the commands during presentations. So we are looking actively at identifying employees that would be tested based on the pattern of conduct and based on some of the triggers in regards to risk management, risky behaviors.
I'm still a little bit unclear in terms of, for example, is any of the information that comes through the Teams process or any of that, any of those sources of information relevant to where we certainly in various contexts hear lots of instances of investigations relating to use of force. And so just again, need a little more clarity as to what maybe there's a difference in we're looking at it in a couple of different contexts that are not picked up in this report, or is there some overlap between the other sources of information relative to use of force and the kind of testing that you're doing?
When it comes specifically to use of force, sir, we would have to have a trigger. We don't actively look through the team system in regards to the use of force. But obviously, if there is an officer that has a pattern that they have out of policy use of forces, and we become aware of it through the various sources that we get notified to test people throughout the department, at that time we will look for that specific behavior. And I think the constitutional testing has really helped us out with us getting a really objective test in regards to use of force. And with the increase in the constitutional testing, we have seen officers engage in a use of force. And obviously down the road, when we evaluate the entire encounter, we compare what is reported, look at the use of force number, and evaluate the entirety of it. But in regards to the use of force system, that the use of force goes through the proper system. We're just looking at different issues like the integrity issues and the reporting issues and stuff that would fall within our domain.
Thank you. I think that maybe the last point is the most salient clarification perhaps, but maybe the chief can comment as well. I'm trying to then clarify, later item D, we have the non-categorical use of force audit, which is really looking at how statements are captured and whether those processes are appropriate. And is that entirely separate, different from a situation where someone may either, whether it's falsify a report relative to use of force or fail to report a use of force or something of that nature? Just help me clarify a little bit the any overlap, if any, or if there is none, why are they completely separate reviews?
Well, Commissioner, the two aspects of this report. The first point is this report represents the change and shift to constitutional policing focus. This was a matter of well over a year ago that we talked about where the emphasis was in these investigations. I want to thank the command and Chief Marino, Captain Mohammadi and the Sergeant Curtis for working and finding a way to achieve that. Secondly, to your point, I'll refer you to page 8 of the biannual report, and it talks about the source of their work. And this is where, to your point, Chief of Police or Professional Standards Bureau will be sitting in a use of force board or a review of personnel complaints or other allegations of misconduct, or a REMAC subcommittee or committee meeting, and will make observations relative to the to do an ethics enforcement inquiry. And this is if you will, targeted, identified, case specific on a variety of topics. It could be anything that you've talked about here, such as sexual harassment, unnecessary use of force, improper tactics, accuracy, or forthrightness in the sense of completion of reports, levels of service. Those are all matters that we'll hear behaviors of employees that may result, it may be sustained acts of misconduct. But what I find particularly useful is that in instances in which we can't determine it, we could not resolve it, or there are lasting concerns. This is where SOD's work is critical, because they can then identify the involved set of officer or officers or supervisors included, and craft an integrity audit based on the subject matter of what's in question, and then check and verify that the individuals are acting as expected. When they don't, then there's actions taken immediately on that. So this is how we choose the subject matters is the evolution of interest of what's before the department and what's before this commission as well. And that's where this unit, because it can't be all things to all people. And then secondly, the source outside of their own initiation is from the Chief of Police, Chief of Professional Standards Bureau, and any command officer. Where are the areas that I want to see some improvement on is I would be more desirous of seeing area captains and bureau chiefs more frequently using SOD resources to trust but verify. This is not this is a process that's important, that we know the vast majority of our men and women act with integrity and demonstrate their commitment to core values. But as we have questions about that, this is a dedicated resource to reassure the public and us that our officers are acting in circumstances which we can't fully demonstrate. Well, let's test that and demonstrate the person's acting with that integrity and that respect of their sworn duties.
So I appreciate that. So when you take everything that you just said, for example, is it fair to say that that there is some element of redundancy? And I'm not talking about being duplicative. I'm talking about in the sense if there is some failure or misstep or something false or crack in one review, that it might be captured through this testing, or again, do they operate in such different I hate to use the word silos, but it's in certain different contexts that one would fall through a crack and maybe not be captured at all. So is there any element of redundancy here, or do they operate in totally different spheres, if you will?
They do not operate totally independent. Why they're in the same chain of command. Captain Mohammadi is a direct report to Chief Marino. for the purposes of really overseeing all matters of discipline and employees' actions and integrity. I wouldn't call it a failure, but because I think that an investigation sometimes can only prove so much. I think this goes to, for instance, why this focus of this commission and myself on constitutional policing was so important. In bias policing investigations, sometimes it's impossible to prove, or often it's impossible to prove a bias. We can many times disprove an explicit bias, or that the officer's actions were based on a bias. But this is another means of testing that by using where we control the factors, we control the suspicious set of circumstances, or what the officer then acts on. By us controlling that, it's a different way of testing to demonstrate adherence or to find weaknesses. So I would not call it a failure, and certainly they don't operate in isolation. And I do believe it's one of, if not the only agency in American policing today that commits these resources for this purpose. And I think it's a needed one, and one that bore out of the consent decree. And I'm proud of the work that this unit has done over time, but also particularly most recently in them shifting and modifying their practices to address your concerns as well as mine.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I may have some, after processing that, may have some further follow-up question that I can consult with Chief Marino or others on. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Any further questions from commissioners? One final question. I'm not sure if this is for Chief Marino or Captain Mohammadi. The objectives stated on page 1, were they updated and revised? They appear different than in the past. Could you briefly respond if you have
Yes,
one?
ma'am. They were updated. Because of our shift from focus on today's trends in policing and the needs in the city of Los Angeles, especially when it came to constitutional policing, procedural justice, or service delivery system, we did modify our objective to meet the department's today's needs and the community's needs. So if you could see, there is no word that omnipresence is not there anymore, because we couldn't quantify it. So we wanted to have more tangible objectives that we could discuss through these meetings with you.
Absolutely, that makes sense, Captain. I appreciate that, and it certainly seems like a more modern approach to the work that you're doing. So I do appreciate that. Seeing no further questions from commissioners, I'll call the item, and the requested board action is to approve the department's report, which I will move forward. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Very well, it passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Madam Secretary, let's call our next item, which is item 3D, the department's report relative to the non-categorical use of force audit. And Commander Runkunis and Police Administrator 1 Zicker. If we could ask you to turn your cameras on as well. There we go. And if, good morning again. If you could begin, good morning, begin by providing us with a brief overview of the report before us. Thank you.
Absolutely. The report before you discusses the non-categorical use of force audit that was performed by Audit Division, and this was part of our calendar of 2020 audits. We focused on reviewing the policy, procedures, and consistency of statements by reviewing body-worn video and non-categorical use of force documentation. We found that the percent meeting standards ranged between 93% and 100% on the following objectives: interviewing all department employees, suspects, and witnesses, consistency in statements across witnesses, reports documenting the presence of body-worn video recordings, and the reports were approved by the appropriate supervisor. Given that OO was largely successful in meeting each of these objectives, Audit Division's recommendation is simply to recirculate the relevant department manual sections to achieve something closer to 100% compliance in all cases. I have my whole team here who worked on this audit. Sergio Sais is the officer in charge who oversaw this audit. He's here with me to answer questions, along with Detective Sutton and Lovett. And of course, I'm available to answer questions. And it's my understanding that there's also a representative of OO who can address any actions that were taken in response to our audit.
Is there someone present, you or one of your colleagues, who can just briefly explain how 29 is a statistically valid sample for non-categorical uses of force? It just seems to me to be a low number. Is there someone that can explain that in everyday language?
Good morning, Commissioner. My name is Sergio Sais. And what we used here was we used a confidence level of 95%, an acceptable error rate of 5%, and a proportion of success of 96%. And it's that proportion of success that's really critical here to determining the number. And the reason for that is that based on the type of success that we've had on previous audits, we plug in that information into our formula, and then that determines the size of our sample. So if you were to look at 2018, it was the last time that we did our audits, I mean, almost all of them were, I think as I look at it, the lowest number I see for 2018 was 96%, and almost all of them were 100%. So because we had such a high compliance rate, you need fewer numbers to give you what a statistically valid answer to the sample size that you need. And then you can take that sample size because of the randomness and be able to put it toward the entire population. So that's how we arrived at that number, the proportion of success being the key element there.
Right. Thank you very much. And thank you for giving a layperson's version of that. I know you can give a far more sophisticated explanation to that, but thank you for that. Commissioners, questions, please let me know if you have any questions. Open up your microphones if you do. Commissioner Bonner, sir, go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to, and this also might be either for Commander, well, actually it's probably for the Chief, because it's a big picture question, somewhat attached to the conversation we were just having relative to the ethics integrity test. And if I were a member of the public or anyone for that matter who wanted to get a comprehensive look at non-categorical use of force issues relative to the department, I'm going to imagine that I would find like this report, these two reports that are the audit report and this other report that are here today. My assumption is that they're available obviously in connection with this meeting. They're probably posted online somewhere. But is there or could there be at some point as the website is being redesigned and all that work is going forward, could there also be a system of links so that if I'm looking at this non-categorical use of force audit that might tell me one piece of information, but that the website could also direct me to also assess the ethics integrity test, and either of those could also suggest a review of the annual use of force report that would have other information. The concern is that again, that as this information is disclosed, the department's trying to be transparent and so on, that you still do have this issue of how the information is presented, because one could look at the use of force report for a report just of the incidents, how many uses of force were there, of what type, involving what types of people. Then one would have to do some other homework to find their way to another area of the website that might address the audit as to, well, how's all this documented and how's all that being handled. And then yet this other area that would have to you'd have to know about and look for in order to assess the integrity test. So that just the question, aside from, we can talk some more in the future about, I know I still have some thoughts about how the tests themselves are put together and formatted, but on this issue of how they would be disclosed and available publicly, is there anything that would prohibit that kind of presentation on the website? Because I find that a lot where there's information that's available, and if you know where to look, and it's not necessarily very intuitive. So the suggestion would be to figure out how you could present this kind of like you might see in a more consumer-oriented area where the links are there available, so you could spend all day going through various rabbit holes that are relevant to the same topic.
Yes, the current effort by the organization has been supported by the Police Foundation, which, because there is no funding internally for the department for internal website or external website, is to do just that, is to make it more intuitive, that as you have a natural question, that the information on the external website provides links and information. I will say that this reminds me of college or my university experience, which is you do have a needle in a hayfield, in a sense of potential answers or questions and leads. So we do have to provide some, it helps us to provide some guidance. We have one of the best firms, we believe, to help and support us. We've described this very problem that you described to us. They're not police professionals, so that helps us for them to decode it, if you will. We know what we know, but to a layperson, an outside researcher, or a person who has an inquisitive idea of where they want to explore this, we want to make it more readily available. So we're in the midst. I expect to see that website by the summer. We're moving aggressively with media relations personnel and with a small working group. And I invite you to the next planning meeting that they have to see some of the mock-ups and work that they've provided and provide your feedback as well. This is our effort is to be transparent, and we want to make sure people can readily access what can be at times a complicated matter.
Appreciate that, and so I would appreciate if you would let me know when that planning session is, and I could make my best effort to get a better understanding as you suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Other questions from Commissioner Briggs?
To Ms. Hunziker and her team just for a moment, and it's to pick up on what you mentioned, Commissioner Decker, with regard to the sample size. And I'm only raising this question in light of what we've now seen historically with regard to polling and statistical data with regard to national and local elections, and how a lot of pollsters got it so wrong. And one of the criticisms was and is the sample size. So in light of that, I mean, would we benefit from a larger sample size of at least 10% of the population of sworn officers at a bare minimum? I know that's an increase over the 29 that we have there, but would that help us get a better picture? I just don't want to have the commission and this body and the auditors accused of underrepresenting and getting a picture that is not representative of what's really going on out there.
Understood. Commissioner Briggs, I believe one of your new roles is as part of the executive committee. The audit division has committed to meeting with the executive committee periodically. I recently inquired whether we could arrange a meeting with the executive committee. And so we would be happy to sit down with you and Commissioner Decker to discuss potential alternatives. We can give you a little bit more background about why we choose the sample sizes that we do. That fluctuates depending on the need of the particular audit or inspection. But we'd be happy to discuss further with you what we currently use and whether that's something that we would be using going forward.
Thank you. That would be helpful.
I should add, commissioners, the Inspector General had previously listed off to us in a prior meeting the upcoming reports that he is working on, and one of them is on a non-categorical use of force report. Mr. Inspector General, could you just give us briefly estimated timeline on when you expect that report? Did he was, oh, there you are, sir. Yes. Sorry, you moved on my screen. There you are.
No worries. Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, our report into non-cats is expected in the second quarter this year. Right now, anticipate June. And we will have a sample size. We approximate about 80 cases for our report.
Okay, very well. And Mr. Inspector General, if I could ask you, and perhaps the audit division. When the commission gets that report back, if we could also get the audit division's report brought back to us, just so we have it as part of the record in reviewing everything with respect to non-categoricals. I think that will help all commissioners in just having all the materials together. So thank you. Are there other questions from commissioners regarding this particular audit? All right, I see no hands, so thank you. Thank you all. The recommended board action is to approve the department's report. I will move it forward. Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Very well, it passes 5-0. Thank you. And in order for item E, I believe we're keeping everyone who's currently on the panel and bringing up Deputy Chief Chris Pitcher, I believe. And this is the department's report relative to the electronic suspected child abuse reporting system audit. And once we have the chief with us, and I see we have Lieutenant Potter as well, and Chief Pitcher, I assume, is here. If you turn on your welcome, Lieutenant Potter, and I think I saw
Chris Waters, Captain Waters.
Oh, there you are, Captain Waters. Welcome. And am I correct that Deputy Chief Pitcher is to join us as well?
I'm probably going to be handling.
Oh, are you?
Yes,
Very
ma'am.
well. Thank you so much. Thank you, Captain Waters, Lieutenant Potter. And since this is an audit, I assume Audit Division is taking the lead on the presentation. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. If you could please begin by presenting to the Commission a broad overview of the report before us, as well as the findings.
Yes, good afternoon. Once again, my name is Trina Unticker. I'm the commanding officer of Audit Division. The report before you discusses the electronic suspected child abuse report system audit. It's otherwise known as eSCARS. This audit was also performed in conjunction with our 2020 annual audit plan. The board requested this audit with a special focus on no investigation dispositions, and the purpose was to measure how the department adheres to its policy, procedures, and the operating agreement between LA County's DA's office and the LAPD. We found that electronic records were appropriately closed as no investigation 93% of the time. Electronic records with the no investigation disposition were correctly classified 100% of the time. All electronic records, regardless of status, were opened timely 99% of the time and completed on time between 70 and 73% of the time, depending on how the completed date was determined. Audit Division's recommendation is focused on making improvements to adherence with the 10 calendar day timeframe of investigation completion. It's our understanding that Juvenile Division and OO performed some of their own inspections after this audit was concluded and found that the compliance rate improved. Sergeant Cindy Chow was the officer in charge of this audit, and she's here with me to answer questions. And I believe, of course, that there are representatives of the Juvenile Division and OO who can address questions regarding actions that I know that they've taken as a result of the audit.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think I'd like to ask Captain Waters or Lieutenant Potter or whoever you designate to share with us what you have done to particularly improve that 70% timely investigation. As you can imagine, obviously that in the entire audit is a number that just sticks out, particularly since we're dealing, as you know, with children, victims who you dedicate your lives to helping. So if you could please explain the actions you've taken as a result of the audit and perhaps other actions you've taken as well to improve that 70 to 73% number.
Yes, ma'am. I'll get started. And again, Lieutenant Potter is here, and she's OIC over the Abused Child Unit and ICU, which is the Investigative Control Unit. The audit is now a year old, and we've implemented several systems and procedures since then to bring our department into compliance. First being the beginning with the Chief of Detectives notice dated July 30th, 2020, to standardize dispose for SCARs within the eSCAR database. We've been We have ongoing training with the eSCAR coordinators on a regular basis, as well as our ICU personnel. The order covers the entry, dispo, and overall duties of eSCAR coordinators at the divisions. We conduct those inspections quarterly. And although we're not at 100%, we are trending over the whole board, we're trending in the right direction. We are, as a department, in the 90th percentile in every area. The following actions are measures that have been implemented at Juvenile Division since the March 2020 audit. Our quarterly inspections that cover the areas, again, reviewed in this audit. In addition, our quarterly training with our detective COs, we have that on quarterly basis. We have a monthly CompStat report that we complete, and it includes the backlog of in reports with eSCARs. And basically, if there's any discrepancies or anything like that, they're discussed with the eSCAR coordinators. Our inspections also are not only given to the eSCAR coordinators, but also to the detective COs and to the bureaus. There's also a great coordination and communication between our ICU unit and our divisional eSCAR coordinators. And then we utilize a two-prong approach, not only from the inside with the training and different procedures and things that were aforementioned, but also with the outside. We work and communicate and collaborate with our district attorney. We sit on the eSCAR steering committee, and also in working with the DA, they also track and inspect and monitor the eSCAR reports, because this is a countywide database. And also our eSCAR coordinators, in the event that there's a deviation from the 10-day rule, they have to make sure that it's noted in the system. And something could be as like maybe the Safe LA protest or something like that. And that's been the exception and not the rule. We also coordinate with the DCFS hotline and have a good relationship with them as well. We have just recently this week completed the fourth quarter inspection, which covers October 1st through December 31st. And our percentages, especially in the area, everything was in the 90th percentile rate, but we put special attention, and there's a specific special part, second part to our inspections with the no investigation disposition and the 10-day. The 10-day investigation, the 98% of the SCAR investigations met the department's requirement for the 10-day investigation guidelines, and 95% of the inspected SCARs with the disposition of non-investigations were properly closed out.
Captain, can I just get some clarity on that? And I realize some time has passed since the audit was completed and to when it's presented. And by the way, for Audit Division, that was largely due to a change in personnel. Is that correct? You took over the command there?
Yes.
Okay. They're on mute.
What'd you say?
They're on mute, so I'm, Ms. Unzicker?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Just want to be sure that was correct. So Captain Waters, I'm sorry, my question for you, ma'am, is the report indicates 70 to 73% timely investigation completion within that 10-day requirement. And what you're saying is now, as a result of the changes and your internal review and inspections, have resulted in it going up over 90%. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am. Ongoing training, ongoing reports. The monthly reports that are the CompStat reports are actually done weekly by our chief Pitcher during CompStat. So it's highly recognized, and we're monitoring it, and everything is in place.
Very good. I greatly appreciate that clarification. And if I'm remembering correctly, this audit was instigated in part, I believe, over another report we received over the definition of term no investigation. And the concern was whether that term was properly properly defined and what exactly it meant, particularly because we're dealing with children here. Can you explain briefly, Captain, or one of the other members of your team, the term "no investigation," what precisely that means, and with respect to the eSCARS program?
Okay, I'm going to have Lieutenant Potter take over and do that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I am.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. After the inspection audit that we did in 2019 regarding the 4,000 reports where the no investigation was referenced, we recognized that department-wide there needed to be a standardization for all dispositions of suspected child abuse reports. And based on that, Juvenile Division wrote and had published standardized disposition of suspected child abuse reports, Chief of Detective Notice that was published July 30th. So with that standardization and our consistent communication with the juvenile coordinators, that's really what has impacted our change in our percentage of the proper classification, specifically for the no investigation cases.
Thank you, Lieutenant. Let me ask other commissioners if you have questions. May I ask the other commissioners if you have questions on this report? Commissioner Kalanche, go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, Captain, Lieutenant. I'm curious to find out what is the biggest obstacle to kind of meeting the 10-day requirement. I'm trying to figure out, like, internally, like, what is the biggest challenge? Is it personnel or other issues?
I would say that in many instances, the biggest issue is the volume of SCARs that we get as a city. LAPD handles the largest percentage of SCARs throughout the entire county. Yearly, we can have SCARs upwards of 20,000. Right. And then we have certain areas that just by nature of where they are within our city have a larger number of SCARs. So I would say that's the biggest issue to overcome. But I will say that the order regarding the 10-day rule was published in November of 2019. And it took a couple months for everybody to get on board, but really starting in the beginning of 2020, the areas have done a great job in meeting that rule. And we also build in there that if they deviate from the 10-day rule, if they document that, like Captain Waters was saying, whether it was a deployment issue because of, we were deployed for some other incident in the city, or there was a holiday, or we had staff out for COVID, as long as they document that to explain why they deviated from the 10-day rule, that helps us in situations like this for everybody to understand why they didn't meet that deadline.
Okay, so the numbers are, as I think Captain Waters mentioned, the numbers are trending more towards,
at this point, we're upward of 90% compliance with the 10-day rule. And when we're outside of the 10 days, the majority of those are closed within 15 to 20 days.
Yeah,
Mike Rakunas here from operations. I just have to add something real quick, because I think it's important in regards to the 10-day, the 10-day requirement. During the course of this review, this work ITB, our Information Technology Bureau, and what we've done is all we modified the detective case tracking system, so where detectives are notified of the status of their investigations to adhere to the 10-day requirement. I think that's huge on the completion of the required reports within the 10-day guidelines. So detectives are notified as their investigations are starting to time out, as they start to reach the 8th, the 9th, the 10th day, as a reminder to be, as a notification that they're coming up on that 10-day mark. Now, not all are caught, and there's reasons why they surpassed the 10-day mark, but our goal is not to. But that was built in, I think, to help correct this problem. And that started in October of 20, after we were working through this report, trying to find out the reasons why our percentage rate was so low. So I just wanted to add that into what has been done since to improve the 10-day compliance rate.
That's really good. Yeah, I mean, I was surprised by the number of cases. Yeah, so that was something I was wondering about. And I mean, it would be great to get the number. I mean, because it involves children, that we don't wait the 10 days to close these out, right? But I guess a follow-up maybe for the chief is, do we get any funding from the county to support these efforts? It just seems like a lot that's put on the city and LAPD.
So no, there's not funding for this. This is a shared responsibility that we have with the Department of Children and Family Services. We are we investigate independent of the Department of Children and Family Services. They investigate independent of us. We do cross staff and share our notes with them and them with us. This is part of the safety net to ensure that nothing falls between the cracks, meaning that an investigation that a person did not know to reach out to the police department, and they have no other resource, so it just goes unanswered. But mandated reporters such as school officials, counselors, and others, we're one of the portals. And then this eSCAR process then creates this investigation. But to your point of the hundreds and thousands of this, Lieutenant Potter's right, we're one of the highest agencies, if not the highest law enforcement agency in the county for these numbers. But we strive for 100%. I appreciate the added focus this last year, our commitment. The other aspect of this is, and one of the challenges is, juvenile investigators oftentimes will want to own this case because of the intensity. Right. And what we're talking about is we need to get in the door within a short period of time. And if that means a patrol resource or an off-hour resource that's not a juvenile detective or a juvenile investigator, then that's what's needed in order to achieve, not just to achieve this compliance, but stop in the instance in which abuse continues, to stop it from perpetuating because of a workload issue. So it's an all hands. We're not funded. We're committed to it. This is a critical issue. This is our next generation of the community, and we're here to protect them.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate the work that's happening. I really feel that we need some outside funding, especially county funding. Something we should think about, because it's such an important job that we're doing on these matters. Yeah. So okay.
Commissioner Decker, I'd like to add one point of clarification. The audit that you're looking at obviously is from last year. However, I don't think it was clear in the discussion from Juvenile Division, but Juvenile Division conducts quarterly audits of all of these areas of interest that you see here before you. And that is how they arrived at the 95% for the objective one that was discussed in the AD audit, as well as the 98% today. Those audits go every quarter, and those are used also to train all of the divisional eSCAR coordinators to see any of the trends or issues or problems, to address them almost in real time, to make sure that the system is flowing effectively. And I also use all of the audits that Juvenile Division does in the weekly ComStat inspections, when we talk to the divisions about the eSCARs, the completions, and the total cases that they have. So I just wanted to make sure that you are aware this is a continual process of audit for Juvenile Division.
Appreciate that, Chief Pitcher, very much for your adding that clarification. Commissioner Kalanche, had you completed your questions, ma'am?
Yes. Just kind of want to keep this on our radar. I think it's such an important thing that LAPD does, and that I think we should look at ways to expand the resources for the department. So it's something that I just kind of want to keep it on our radar.
Absolutely, Commissioner Kalanche. And if I may ask you to take the lead on that for the commission and work with Juvenile Division, I'd very much appreciate it. I think we all very much would. Let me ask the other commissioners if you have any further questions on this report.
Yeah.
Commissioner Bonner, go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. Probably, actually, I don't know if ultimately it's a question maybe for Chief Pitcher or Ms. Unzicker or any of the above, so to speak. But let me first go back to a conversation, Chief, that we had yesterday, and so you can first clarify or see if I'm understanding this correctly. That that again, with the that a lot of these cases are discovered in the school system, and people who interact with children who see signs of abuse, so part of the question, because I'm assuming that some of those instances then result in some of these reports. And if that's accurate, we were talking yesterday about the potential for seeing an increase in this area as more kids are leaving their homes and going back into the school systems and engaging with counselors and teachers and others who may be seeing signs of abuse. And so first, if I'm understanding that correctly, that some of that activity that we were discussing is manifest through this process. That's one question, because if it's not, then maybe the rest of this question doesn't have much relevance. But if it is, I'm looking, at the chart, the flow chart that's on page 18 of the report that kind of shows how all of these things are, are processed. And I'm listening to the conversation about the 10-day closeout of the e-scars and so on. And the concern is that if the premise is correct, that there's a potential for more of these to be, to get into the system as more people are laying eyes on kids throughout the city. There's a concern about whether the system is, there was the comment the lieutenant mentioned a few minutes ago that volume, is one of the issues, and the number of these, the sheer number of these reports. So I'm concerned about waiting too long before we take another look to see whether any potential increase really is being processed appropriately and things are really working as they need to be. So the question, I suppose, is that is there maybe what Chief Pitcher said a minute ago, that juvenile division looks quarterly. What I'm looking for is some assurance that if we get in later in the year and if there is an increase in these e-scars or other reports, how will we know, short of waiting another year or so for an audit, how would we know that the system is continuing to hold up and is working well, and that there aren't any bottlenecks emerging or rising?
So the answer,
the oversight of this, Chris, and I'll start this and let you and Captain Waters and Lieutenant Potter handle this, but just oversight, we remain flexible. It's a triage system. It goes to ICU, juvenile division. They triage it, and as you see on that flow chart, you have immediate dispatch, or then you have the divisional school car, J car, juvenile officers that handle it. And that fork in the road that's there is adapting to the various workloads. Mission area, for instance, is one of the highest, I believe them in 77th of the highest number of e-scars in the entire city. So those commands, that's an attribute of those commands as to monitoring the number of cases that are coming in and moderating the resources assigned to them so that they are investigated thoroughly and timely. As those numbers change, Juvenile Division is watching this every day, every week, every month. ComStat inspection processes to find trigger points in a sense that we're not meeting the mandates as far as a 10-day investigation. The investigative quality through the inspections are withstand the expectations of the organization. So this is a monitoring process that the organization is engaged in. We're not going to have a lagging indicator here where months from now we find suddenly we've got a whole stash of these someplace that haven't been attended. This is part of our discussions internally, as I say, externally, that we're anticipating things coming. Is kind of a commander's intent. Let's be mindful, this is coming. We know the hurricane or the storm is coming, with the potential may or may not occur, but we think it will. And let's be leaning forward to ensure that we add resources and prioritize this over other competing priorities to ensure that we meet this moment.
And by the way, was I correct that this is either not the system, or at least one of a system that will show where some of these increased reports may show up?
Oh, absolutely. This is these are tips and leads. Many of these tips and leads do not result in actual instances of child abuse or neglect, but this is a tip and lead for suspected issues of child abuse or neglect. And it's again, it's another measure. The actual crime reports, of course, are yet another measure and actual physical investigations. But this is certainly a measure, one we pay very close attention to, and one that we know, again, that out of 100 cases, we have to get it right 100 times. And so that's where the priority here is to make sure we not just meet the mandate, but that we protect these victims from being further victimized.
Well, I appreciate that. I would just note then for Commissioner Kalanche, as you undertake this review, just be aware that that there is that expectation that there's going to be some increased pressure on this system that you'll want to take note of and understand how everybody's adjusting. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Any further questions from commissioners? I see no further questions. Thank you all for your presentation and for your hard work in this area and for your diligence in improving the system since this audit was presented to us, since it was completed. So thank you all. With that, the recommended board action is to approve the department's report. I will move it forward. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes 5-0. Thank you very much. And we'll keep Commander Rimkunis and Ms. Unzicker as well. And our final audit that's being presented to us today is the department's report relative to the Community Online Reporting Service audit. If I could ask Audit Division to give an overview of the report as you've been doing this morning. Thank you.
Good afternoon again. Trina Unzicker, the Commanding Officer of Audit Division. The report before you discusses the Community Online Reporting Service audit performed by Audit Division as part of our calendar year 2020 annual audit plan. The core system allows community members to report minor incidents through the LexisNexis website. When a citizen files their report, departmental personnel review those reports. Our audit's focus is on whether reports were approved within required timeframes, whether community members were informed appropriately if reports filed were rejected, and whether the reports accepted contained all the information that was needed for the department to move forward. For those objectives, we found that the percent meeting standards ranged between 93% and 100%. Audit Division's recommendation is based on an observation made during the audit process that the Corps' report types displayed to the public appear to be different depending on whether you look at the website or the Corps' handbook. There have been some changes from what I understand from speaking with the commander at OO to the first and second level review processes since we did our audit, and that's now being handled by the DOC. Wendy Gamble was the officer in charge who oversaw this this audit, and she is here with me to answer questions about our report. I also have Detective Hector Sanchez, who assisted with this audit. And I believe there's also a representative of OO who can address questions regarding any of the actions that were taken in response to the audit.
Thank you. Commander Rimkunis, if you wouldn't mind giving us an update on the changes that have been made as a result.
Yes, Commissioner. So just to start off, CORS was approved by the City Council in 2015, and there was a CORS user handbook that was developed in 2016. So in light of this audit, we are in the process of reconfiguring and changing the user handbook to update a lot of the procedures that are now currently taking place. When CORS was first stood up, the back office of the Office of Operations handled all of the reviews and processing of the reports. At this time, it's the Department Operations Center that's fully staffed with police officers and watch commanders who, when the report comes in, it gets reviewed, processed, either sent back for additional information or not approved based on violence or things like that. The watch commander at the DOC then sends that to the area records. And what we found in this audit was the timeliness. You know, there's a 5-day time mark where we want the reports approved, processed, and then distributed to the area detectives. In this case, we fell short in, I believe, 5 cases. So now the Office of Operations has mandated like a 48-hour turnaround time in regards to area records processing the reports to ensure that we are providing quality service as we would with our patrol folks. There's a response when a community member uses the online reporting, which is something that we value. It frees up officers and allows the community member, to file reports in a timely manner. Our goal is to ensure that it is processed and sent to the appropriate detective timely. So we've made those changes in the process of updating the book, the user book, the handbook, to ensure that all of those notes are documented.
Thank you very much, Commander. Questions from the board? Commissioners? I see no questions. Thank you very much. Thank you for, by the way, thank you to Audit Division for all of the audits you've presented today. We appreciate your work. The recommend, and please thank your entire team as well, please.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. So for item F, the recommended board action is to approve the department's report. I will move it forward. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Very well. It passes 5-0. Thank you very much. That concludes our regular agenda. We'll move on to closed session. Madam Secretary, can you take us out, please?
The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss agenda items 4A1, 4B1 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Thank you very much. Very well, we're returning from closed session. We'll get started in a moment. There we go. Mr. Tiefenk,
Yes, ma'am.
could you please do a readout of today's closed session? Mr. Tiefenk, we can't hear you, sir.
I apologize, not on mute. As it relates to item 4A1, tactical unintentional discharge 015-20, the commission unanimously on a 5-0 vote adopted the chief's recommendations, which were tactics administrative disapproval, 1 police officer 2, tactical debrief, 1 sergeant 1, and 1 police officer 2. Drawing and exhibiting in policy, 2 police officer 2s and 1 sergeant 1. Unintentional discharge, administrative disapproval, 1 police officer 2. As to item 4B1, adjudicated. That concludes the readout.
Thank you very much. Our only remaining business is adjournment. I will move that we adjourn. Is that seconded?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned until the next scheduled board meeting. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.